Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 5 creepiest graves ever discovered. Across the U.S., we return to the quiet edges of the world, where the hum of the living fades, and only the wind moves through the graves. These are the stories buried in stone and soil, tombs that whisper, monuments that bleed history, and resting places that refuse to rest. Every account you're about to hear is real, taken from those who've stood before these graves and felt the cold awareness of something watching from below. My goal this month is to reach 4,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers wander in, listen, and vanish into the dark without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Join the darkness. Subscribe now. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there's a grave or cemetery in your town that truly unsettles you, type its name below. Because when the world sleeps and the soil settles, some things beneath it do not rest. Kill the lights, silence the world, take a slow breath, and let us begin. My name is Caleb, and I'm from Madison, Georgia. I rent a small white house on a 2-lane road just outside the old town square. If you stand on my front porch and look straight ahead, you're looking at the cemetery. People picture something big when you say that, but this one isn't. It's a small Victorian-era place, maybe a block long, with an iron fence around it and one of those arches with the name curled in metal at the top. Near the road, the grass is short and neat, and the stones are lined up in pretty good rows. But once you get past the front half, it starts to go wild. Trees crowd closer together, the ground dips in spots, and the grass just sort of takes over the older markers. I live there with my cousin, Dylan. He moved in about a year ago when he got a job over in Athens and wanted something cheaper than the apartments there. He pays me a little rent, and I like having someone else in the house, especially because I work from home most days. I'm a medical billing clerk for a clinic 3 counties over. It's not exciting, but it's steady, and nobody bothers me much as long as I hit my numbers. My desk is set up in the front room, right by the window, so the view I get all day is the iron fence and those stones. When we first moved in, it felt kind of peaceful, honestly. The street is quiet. Sometimes a truck goes by, and the house shakes a little. You hear dogs a few houses over, a few kids on bikes on the weekends, that kind of thing. Mostly it's just wind in the trees and the sound of gravel when somebody pulls into the little parking strip in front of the cemetery. On Sundays, you can hear the church bells from downtown, soft and a little out of tune. In the evenings, you get cicadas and then crickets, and sometimes a train horn way off past the highway. Dylan joked about the cemetery right away. He'd stand on the porch at night and say, "Prime real estate, all your neighbors are quiet," stuff like that. He's that kind of guy. I never minded it. For the first few months, honestly, the cemetery felt more like a park. There's a gravel path that runs down the middle, and a big old broken angel statue right about in the center. Its one remaining wing leans forward, and the face is chipped where the eyes should be. There are a few benches, too. Some afternoons, this older lady would sit on one of them with a paperback, like it was just the town square. You notice certain things if you look every day. There are a lot of stones with the same last name, all in one section. Some of them have the same year listed for the date of death, like the whole family went at once. There are lambs carved on some of the children's markers. I remember thinking more than once that whoever carved those lambs must have had a hard job doing that over and over. But that was just one of those passing thoughts. At the time, it didn't feel creepy. It was just there, part of the view. Most days were the same for me. Up around 7, coffee, log in, answer emails. I'd see the grounds guy now and then, pushing one of those little mowers along the front half, doing his best to keep it all even. He never went far toward the back. I figured maybe it was uneven back there or full of roots. I'd watch a bit through the blinds, then go back to my codes and claims. Dylan would roll out later, grab a cereal bar, then head to work. Life was quiet, kind of boring in a good way. The first odd thing, looking back, was the gate. The cemetery has this iron gate in the front, with a latch you have to lift. It squeaks when somebody opens it. For the first few months, it was always either clearly open or clearly shut. You'd hear it when people went in, creak, clank, and that made sense. One morning in early fall, I noticed it swinging, just a little back and forth. It was one of those still mornings where the air feels heavy. The leaves barely moved, but the gate kept rocking, slow, metal tapping metal. I figured it was the wind at first. Or maybe someone had just walked through and I'd missed them. The gravel on the path looked undisturbed, though. No fresh tracks. When I went out later to check the mailbox, it was still moving. I stopped and grabbed it, expecting it to be loose. But the latch felt solid. It only moved if I pushed it. I let go, and it stayed still. When I got back to my desk and looked again, it was quiet. I told myself I'd just caught it at the tail end of something and forgot about it. A few days after that, I noticed flowers. That's normal in a cemetery, obviously, but these were fresh, bright red carnations in a little glass jar, set on a stone I'd never seen anyone visit. I know that sounds weird, like I was keeping tabs on everybody, but you have to remember, I'm facing this place 8 hours a day. You notice patterns. Nobody ever parked near that row. Nobody walked to that part. Not the lady with the paperback, not the grounds guy. Nobody. The headstone itself was older. The date was from the 1890s. The name was worn but still readable. I remember the year more than the name. 1894. It's set a little apart from the family section, near the broken angel. I thought maybe the church had done something, or the town. Then the next morning, the flowers were gone. Not wilted, gone. No jar, nothing knocked over. Just bare stone again. It was easy to explain at first. Maybe a relative came early, put flowers down, then took them home after. Maybe kids took them. I didn't think more of it then. I just happened to mention it to Dylan that night when we were on the porch. He squinted across the road. "Which one?" "The single stone by the angel," I said. "There were carnations this morning. Now there's nothing." He shrugged. "Maybe she didn't like 'em." "Who?" He smirked. "Whoever's under there. Maybe she's picky." I rolled my eyes, and that was that. We went back in. The screen door creaked behind us, and the house did that settling sound it does when the temperature drops. Little pops and taps in the walls. Normal old house stuff. Things kept, I don't know, nudging me after that. Alone, none of it meant much. The motion light on our porch started coming on late at night. We'd be in the living room with the TV low, and suddenly white light would splash across the front window. Usually that just meant a raccoon or a cat. I'd go check sometimes, especially at first. I'd open the door, the air would hit me. Cooler outside, leaves scraping a bit on the pavement, and there'd be nothing. No animal on the steps, no car going past. I told myself it was bugs or a glitch in the sensor. One Tuesday, I was on the phone with a patient about their bill when I heard what sounded like footsteps on the gravel path across the street. Crunch, crunch, steady. I glanced up and saw someone walking toward the back half of the cemetery. Dark coat, head down, nothing dramatic. I finished the call, typed a note, looked back up, and the path was empty. Nobody at the back, no sound of the gate. The motion light hadn't gone on either. I figured they'd just turned off somewhere behind the central trees where I couldn't see. That evening, Dylan said, "You ever feel like they're closer at night?" "Who?" I said. He nodded toward the window, where you could just make out the top row of stones in the porch light. Them. I swear they look closer after dark. They're not moving, man, I said. They're rocks. He laughed. Yeah, I know. Just feels different is all. He hesitated, then added, Sometimes I see someone standing by that angel when I come home late. Thought it was you one time. They don't move. I looked at him. You sure it's not just the statue? Maybe, he said. Probably. I'm half asleep most nights. He changed the subject, but that stuck in my head. I started paying more attention when he came home. A few nights later, I heard his car door, heard him come up the steps. I peeked out from the kitchen. No one standing by the angel, just that broken stone shape, half in shadow. When he came in, he said nothing about it, so I didn't bring it up either. The next stage, if you want to call it that, had more to do with names. Part of my job involves double-checking patient info, so I spend a lot of time looking at surnames, dates, addresses. One day I noticed that one of the families in the cemetery, the set of matching stones with the same year of death, had the same last name as an older patient in our system. That's not strange in a small southern town. Names repeat. But it made me wonder how long his family had been around. On my lunch break, I walked over there. The gate squeaked under my hand. I remember the smell of damp leaves and this faint sweetness from somewhere, like somebody had opened a jar of old potpourri. Up close, those stones looked more worn than they did from the house. Same last name, 3 markers, all with the same year of death. 1918. I thought of the flu, automatically. That made sense. I walked the path back toward the angel, just kind of wandering, crunch of gravel under my shoes. When I got to that single 1894 stone, I realized I'd never really read the full name before. The last name was faint, but the first name was clear. It matched my cousin's. Same spelling, same short first name, right there in the stone. The year of birth was 1872. The year of death, like I said, 1894. I stood there a second and told myself it was just one of those coincidences. There are only so many names that get used a lot. Still, walking back, it felt like the air had cooled down. The insects were quieter. I heard a crow somewhere in the trees, then nothing. When I got to our side of the road and stepped off the gravel, a truck roared past and the spell broke. Normal sound came back. Dog barking, distant lawnmower. I shook it off. That night at dinner, I said, You know there's a grave over there with your name on it? Dylan stopped with his fork halfway to his mouth. Yeah, hilarious, he said. Real comforting. I'm serious, I said. Same first name, almost same spelling on the last. Old though, 1890-something. He chewed slowly, watching me. Cool, he said finally. So I've been here before. Come on, I said. He gave this little grin. Nah, it's fine. I'll just not die in the front yard, I guess. I wanted to laugh, but it didn't quite come out. The fridge hummed a little too loud. Something in the wall knocked, like the pipes had shifted. Normal stuff. I told myself that. About a week later, I went down to the Historical Society. Madison has one of those old brick buildings near the courthouse, with a few rooms of records and photos. I was mostly curious about the family with all the same death year. The woman at the front desk, a thin older lady with glasses on a chain, lit up when I asked about cemetery records. She pulled out a big binder, then another. We talked for a while. She told me about the yellow fever, the flu, all the things that had rolled through town. When I mentioned the single 1894 grave near the angel, she got this small, tight look on her face. Ah, she said. That one. Who was she? I asked. Or he. The name's pretty worn. Records aren't complete, she said. Lot of things got lost. Fire in the county building in the 50s. She closed the binder a little too fast. You living over near there? Yeah, I said. White House across the road. She nodded once, then looked away. Nice little place. Good bones. Do you know why that grave's set apart? She pretended to flip through another section. Sometimes it's just how the land was divided, she said. Sometimes it's cholera. Sometimes it's personal. All you need to know is that it's old. She tapped the page with her nail. And you don't need to worry yourself living over there. She changed the subject after that. Asked about my parents, normal small-town stuff. When I left, I had that feeling you get when someone half warns you and half tells you to mind your own business. Around then, the noises started lining up. The gate would creak at odd hours, even when the wind was dead still. Our motion light would go on, but only when it was really late, close to 3 in the morning. When I checked the porch, there'd be nothing there. But sometimes I'd hear a soft scuff on the road, like a shoe on gravel, stopping the second the door opened. One night, I woke up because the house felt colder than it should. Not open window cold, just thin, like the air had lost something. I lay there and listened. The insects outside had gone quiet. No crickets, no cars, just this faint ticking from the baseboard heater. Then I heard the screen door creak. I knew that sound. It's the same every time. Metal scraping, then a soft bump. I sat up, heart going a little faster, listening for footsteps in the hall. Nothing. The bedroom door was still closed. I told myself Dylan had gone out on the porch to smoke or something. I checked my phone. It was 3:12 a.m. I opened my door quietly. The hallway was dark. A strip of softer dark showed where the living room was. I walked down, bare feet on the wood floor, feeling every little shift and pop in the boards. When I got to the front room, I could see the porch light leaking in around the edges of the curtain. It flickered once, then steadied. "Dylan?" I said. No answer. I pulled the curtain back a little. The porch was empty. The screen door was shut. The gravel strip and the cemetery beyond were just shapes in the weak light. The iron fence looked closer than it should, but I knew that was just my eyes playing tricks. I watched the gate for a minute. It didn't move. When I turned around to go back to bed, that's when I saw the footprints. Small, darker patches on the floor near the entryway, leading from the front door toward the hallway. They were faint, just enough to see in the low light. Not boot prints. More like someone had stepped in damp soil and walked in without really wiping their shoes. The last print was right before the hallway, and then nothing, like they'd just sort of faded. I stood there staring at them, telling myself every sensible thing I could think of. Maybe Dylan had come in earlier when it rained and I hadn't noticed. Maybe I was just seeing discoloration in the wood. I bent down and touched one. It felt cool, but the whole floor felt cool. When I turned on the overhead light, the marks were much less obvious. You had to know where to look. By the time I thought to wake Dylan up and ask him, they were almost invisible. He swore the next morning he hadn't been out. "Man, if I got up in the middle of the night, it was just to pee," he said, yawning. "I didn't go outside." "You sure?" I said. "I would have taken my phone," he said. "Check the porch camera." "We don't have a porch camera." He knew that. He gave me a look like he was trying to decide how serious I was. After a second, he shook his head and poured coffee. "Look, you're staring at headstones all day," he said. "It's gonna mess with you a little. You start connecting stuff that's just random. Brains do that." "I know," I said. And I did know. That's the problem. A few days after that, the voice thing happened. I came home from a late grocery run, arms full of bags, and as I walked up the path by the side of the house, I heard Dylan behind me say, "Hey, you leave the back door open?" "Yeah, I started, turning my head. There was nobody there. Just the dark side yard, the outline of the fence, and beyond that, the faint shapes of stones. The wind moved through the trees once, then stopped. I stood there, the hair on my arms lifting, bags cutting into my fingers. The back door was closed when I got to it, locked even. When I went inside, Dylan was in his room with his headset on, talking to someone online, door half shut. I listened for a bit. His voice came through clear. It didn't match what I'd heard outside. The tone was different. The pace was different. That "hey" I'd heard had been quieter, closer to my ear almost. I didn't tell him about that one. After that, I started keeping little tally marks on a sticky note on my desk. Gate moving when it shouldn't. Motion light at 3 a.m. Footsteps in gravel with no one there. Voice by the side of the house. Fresh flowers on the 1894 grave appearing and vanishing overnight. Because that started happening again too. Pink roses once, then daisies, always in something different. Jar, little pot, tin can, but never there for more than a day. I wanted it to be a person. That would have been simple. Some relative who came at odd hours and didn't want to be seen, or some kid with a weird sense of humor. But I never saw anybody go to that stone, not once. On a Saturday afternoon, I walked back over there with an old instant camera my mom had given me years ago. The town was quiet, sun warm but not hot. A few chipmunks darting along the fence, chattering and then going silent when I approached. I stopped in front of the broken angel first, just to have something solid to focus on. Up close, I could see more details. Small carved feathers worn down, a crack running from the shoulder through the chest. The face was almost gone, just the faint shape of a mouth. I took a picture of it. The camera clicked and spit out the square. I set it on the bench to develop while I walked to the 1894 stone. No flowers that day, just the marker, leaning slightly, letters pale from lichen. I bent down to read the name again. Same as before, but the last name looked less worn somehow, like the letters had come into focus. I told myself it was the light. I took a picture of that stone too. The sound of the camera seemed too loud in the stillness. No cars passed. No dogs barked. Even the wind felt like it was holding its breath. I set that second photo next to the first on the bench and sat down, rubbing my thumb along the rough edge of the wood. After a minute, the first photo, the angel, came into view. Grainy but clear enough. One wing, cracked body, what was left of the face. Only in the picture. The faint mouth looked more defined, curved up at the edges just a bit. The second photo of the grave turned out normally. Stone, grass, the corner of my shoe. I don't have a good explanation for what happened next. Maybe I stacked them wrong. Maybe it was a trick of the angle. But later, back at the house, I looked again, and the angel's mouth was different. Wider. Teeth-like shapes where there shouldn't be. Not a big, exaggerated grin. Just wrong. Like the jaw had shifted a little between pictures. I put the photo in a drawer after that and tried not to think about it. That worked for a few days. I focused on my spreadsheets, on phone calls about co-pays. I watched TV with Dylan. We argued about dumb things. Life went on. The cemetery was just a backdrop again most of the time. Then I found the file. I was cleaning out the little built-in cabinet in the hallway, looking for tape, and at the very back behind some old paint cans was this thin gray folder. No label. Inside were a few photocopies of newspaper clippings from the 1950s and an old black and white photograph. The top clipping mentioned the cemetery by name and something about concern over improper reinterment. Most of the paragraph had been cut off. The photograph showed a scene I recognized right away. The center of the cemetery, the angel, the single stone nearby. Except in the photo, the grave was freshly dug, and there were men standing around it with shovels. One of them wore a sheriff's hat. At the bottom, in faint pencil, someone had written, "A year, 1954. You could just make out the edge of a wooden box in the hole. A casket, I guess. The image wasn't sharp enough to see details inside, but the angle of the men's heads, the way they were all looking down, made my stomach twist a little. Whatever they'd pulled up, they didn't look happy about it. There was another photo behind it, same scene but closer. The broken angel in the background, the grave, and the sheriff holding something. The edges were blurry, but you could see what it was meant to be. A skull. He held it tilted, jaw open, teeth visible. In the photo, the jaw looked off, too wide, like it was forced into something between a scream and a smile. Along the teeth, little dark notches. Could have been dirt. Could have been anything. My eyes kept jumping to the name on the stone behind them. Same first name as my cousin. Same almost spelled last name. The birth and death years were clearer there than they are now. No lichen, no where, just clean letters. I heard Dylan come down the hall behind me. "What's that?" he said. "Old photo," I said, closing the folder halfway. "From the cemetery." He leaned over my shoulder anyway. "Man," he said. "That's nice." He frowned. "Are those carvings on the teeth?" "Probably just damage," I said quickly. "Or the film. It's old." He looked at me for a long second, then at the hallway around us, like he'd never really noticed how close it was to the front door. The house creaked lightly, that slow stretch of wood. Outside, a truck went by, and the vibration rattled the glass in the picture frame over the thermostat. "You know what I heard at the gas station?" he said suddenly. "What?" "One of the guys there, Tommy, the one missing 2 fingers," he said. "He told me they used to dig up graves back there. Said the old sheriff had some problem with, I don't know, cult stuff out on the highway. Bodies. Said a few got moved into this cemetery after the fact, and people started complaining about stuff in their houses." I snorted. "Come on." "I'm just telling you what he said," Dylan replied. "He said the sheriff used to joke that the fence wasn't built to keep people out. It was built to convince people that what was inside would stay put." "It's an iron fence around old stones," I said. "That's all." "Sure," he said. "You keep telling yourself that." He stepped back toward his room, then added, "Hey, by the way, stop leaving your sticky notes on my desk. I don't need a list of weird stuff looking at me while I'm playing games." "I didn't put any notes on your desk," I said. He frowned. "Then whose handwriting is that?" We checked a minute later. There was a yellow sticky on his desk, curled at one corner. Same kind I use, same pen color. But the writing wasn't mine. Different slant, different way of forming the letters. It had 3 little tally marks and 1 word underneath. Gate. The back of it was a little smudged, like it had been pressed against something damp. I threw it away. I don't know why I didn't keep it. Maybe I didn't want more proof. That night, I woke up around 3 again. No obvious reason this time. Just came suddenly to the surface, heart calm, but mind alert. The room was dim from the streetlight outside. I listened. The insects were quiet again. There was a faint hum from the fridge down the hall. Then, soft and clear, from the living room, I heard my own name. Caleb. Not loud, not dramatic. Just said, the way someone would say it if they were trying not to wake the whole house. For a second, I thought it was Dylan. Then I realized the voice didn't match. It sounded flatter, like someone imitating how I hear it in my head, if that makes any sense. I lay there and did nothing. Every sensible instinct told me to stay put, so I did. After a while, the heater clicked on. Somewhere outside, a dog barked once and then stopped. The smell of damp earth came in through the cracked window, stronger than it should have been for a dry night. In the morning, the front door was locked. The gate across the street was closed. On the 1894 grave, there was a single white daisy in a chipped mug. The mug had a crack running down the side with a bit of dried, muddy soil along it, like it had been pulled out of the ground. I've checked those old photos a few more times. The sheriff with the skull, the men around the grave. I don't leave them out. They stay in the middle of the folder, in the back of the cabinet, under the paint cans. Each time I look, the jaw on that skull seems a little wider, the notches on the teeth a little deeper. Maybe that's just my brain, filling things in. I know it could be that. I want it to be that. I still sit at my desk every day, facing the cemetery. I still answer calls and send claims. The grounds guy still only mows the front half. Dylan still jokes, less often now, about how our neighbors never complain about the noise. Life goes on, but every now and then, usually when the air goes very still and the insects all stop at once, I'll glance up and feel, very strongly, that something over there is looking back. Not moving, just watching, waiting for me to look away. I don't take pictures of the angel anymore. I don't walk back to that single stone if I can help it. And when the porch light flickers on by itself at 3 in the morning, I stay in bed and stare at the ceiling and count my own breaths until it goes dark again. They say old cemeteries are peaceful. I used to agree. Now I just keep my eyes on my work and try not to think about the fence or the photos or the sound of my name in my own hallway. They only move when I'm not looking. My name is Caleb, and I'm from Stillwater, Minnesota. I live in one of those old rental houses up the hill from Main Street, the kind with crooked floors and windows that never quite shut the same way twice. If you stand on our front porch and look straight ahead, you're looking right at the cemetery. It's not big, just a small Victorian-era cemetery with a low brick wall around it, about half a block long maybe. There's a little opening where the wall dips down, and a gravel path that runs through the middle. The front half is neat. Somebody mows it pretty regularly and trims around the older stones. There's a broken angel statue near the center. The wings snapped off at the shoulders years ago. The back half, though, once you go past the angel, starts to get a little tangled. The grass runs longer. The ground dips in places. And there are roots pushing up under some of the stones. One grave sits off by itself in a corner, just past where the maintenance guys usually bother to go. First few months I lived here, I barely noticed it. Just another stone. I do data analysis for a company out of the cities. It's all remote now, so most days I'm at the dining room table with my laptop, staring at spreadsheets while the radiator ticks and the pipes hum. It's not exciting work, but it pays on time. My cousin Dylan moved in last year when he got a job at a local print shop. He couldn't afford his own place yet, and I couldn't afford this house alone, so it worked out. He's the one who used to joke about the cemetery. Like, if the porch light flickered, he'd say, "Our neighbors are coming over," and nod at the headstones. Or if a dog barked at nothing out front, he'd go, "Well, somebody's up." It wasn't mean-spirited, just the way he is, always filling quiet with something. Stillwater's not a big city, but it's not tiny either. Tourists come in summer for the river, the old downtown, that kind of thing. Our street is quieter, mostly older houses, big trees, a couple of cars that don't move all winter because their owners head to Arizona. The cemetery sits right across from us like a little pocket of the past. Some days I'd look up from my screen and see a groundskeeper with a leaf blower, or a woman setting flowers on a grave, or nobody at all, just the wind. At first, the cemetery was just part of the view. I walked past it to get to the corner store, cut through it sometimes on my way down the hill if the snow wasn't too deep. The gravel path would crunch under my shoes, and the birds would scatter a little and then go back to whatever they were doing. It felt fine. Quiet, but not bad. A lot of the stones were from the late 1800s, names worn down, dates half filled with lichen. The broken angel was right in the middle, tilted forward like it was trying to listen to something in the ground. Dylan hated walking through it, though he'd never admit that outright. If we were heading downtown together, he'd stay on the sidewalk and go around, even if it added a couple minutes. "I'm not superstitious," he'd say. "I just don't like uneven ground." But he'd glance at the stones when he thought I wasn't looking. Most evenings were the same. I'd log off around 5, stretch my back, maybe step out on the porch with a coffee or a beer if it was warm enough. Cars would go by on the street below, slowly, because of the stop sign. The wind would move through the trees over the graves, leaves rustling, sometimes scraping the pavement when they piled up near the curb. You'd hear a dog bark a few blocks away, or a train horn down by the river. Regular sounds, the kind that make you feel like you live somewhere real. The first thing that felt a little off wasn't even that dramatic. It was a Tuesday in late fall. I remember because the air had that sharp, dry feeling, and there was no rain in the forecast. I stepped out on the porch to take a break from a really boring report and stretched, just looking around. My eyes landed on that one grave in the corner, the one a little apart from the others. The ground right in front of it was dark, like it was wet. Not just a little darker, like someone had poured water in a neat, shallow oval. The rest of the grass around it was dry and brittle, but that patch had this damp, almost muddy look. There were no sprinklers in the cemetery that I'd ever seen, and it hadn't rained in a few days. I remember thinking maybe there was a low spot there where groundwater seeped up. That seemed reasonable. I watched for a minute, shrugged, and went back inside. I didn't even mention it to Dylan that day. Next time I noticed anything was a couple days later, closer to evening. I was reheating leftovers, and Dylan was standing by the sink scrolling through his phone. The sun was going down, that flat, gray kind of sunset where you don't really see much color. Our motion-sensitive porch light kept clicking on and off. "You leave something on the porch?" he asked. "No. Why?" "The light keeps popping on, like something's moving out there." We both went to the front door. I opened it, and the screen door gave that soft, tired creak it always does. The air hit us, cold enough to see our breath. The insects, which had been chirping a little in the bushes, went quiet all at once when the door opened. It was weird, but I told myself it was just the change in light or the sound. The porch light came on as we stepped out. The street was empty. No cars driving by, no people walking dogs. Just the cemetery, the brick wall, the row of headstones peeking over. The wind moved through the trees, and dry leaves scraped along the sidewalk across from us. "Probably a squirrel," I said. Dylan nodded, but he didn't look convinced. "Yeah, or like a big moth. Whatever." We stood there another minute. The light clicked off. Nothing moved. After a while, we went back in, and the radiator rattled when the furnace kicked on, and the whole thing slipped into that file in my head labeled "not worth thinking about." Things stayed like that for a while, little moments that didn't feel connected yet. I'd see those fresh flowers on one of the older graves when I was walking to the store, even though I never saw anyone place them. Or I'd cut through the cemetery on a Saturday, and that patch of ground in front of the lonely grave would still be wet-looking, even though everywhere else was frozen or dry. Once, I walked closer to check it out. The stone itself was small, like for a child. The name was almost worn away, but I could make out enough to know it had been a little girl. The date was from the 1880s. I crouched down and touched the ground. My fingers came away damp and cold. There was no smell of mud, really, just that faint mineral smell you get near water. Drainage, I told myself. Maybe some old pipe under there, part of who knows what from 100 years ago. We live in a town where basements flood if you look at them wrong. It made sense. That same night, Dylan mentioned something when he came in from his car. It was late. I was on the couch half watching some documentary with the volume low. He shut the front door, slipped off his shoes, and frowned. "You out front earlier?" he asked. "Not since, 7. Why?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "I was locking the car and I swear I heard somebody say my name from over there." He jerked his thumb toward the cemetery. Just a, "Hey, Dylan," real soft. "Thought it was you at first." "I was inside," I said. "Probably someone walking by." He shook his head. Street was empty, and it was when somebody's close behind you, but you don't feel breath or anything. Just that closeness. It was like that, but the voice was not there. I don't know. He laughed and waved it off. "Whatever. I'm tired." We both laughed a little, but his shoulders were tight. I told him he was probably hearing a neighbor through the trees. Sound bounces weird around old houses. I've noticed that. A TV 2 doors down can sound like it's in the next room if the wind is right. After that, the little things started spacing closer together. The porch light would click on at the same time every night, almost to the minute, somewhere around 11:15. I checked the clock a few times just to see if I was imagining it. The insects outside would stop when the light came on, every time, like somebody hit mute. Then, after a minute or two, the light would go off again, and the crickets or whatever would start up slowly one by one, like they were testing if it was safe. I told myself it was a car going by every night at that time, hitting the sensor. Once, I even sat on the couch and watched out the window, waiting. The light clicked on. No car, no person. Just the same empty street and the cemetery beyond, darker than usual. My eyes kept going to that one grave in the corner, even though I couldn't really see it in the dark. Around this time, I went down to the local historical society to do some genealogy stuff for my mom. It's in this old brick building near the library. Smells like dust and coffee. There's a woman who works there, I think her name's Marlene, who basically runs the place. I had some free time, so after I finished what I was doing, I asked, "Hey, do you guys have any records on that little cemetery up on 4th, the one across from the old blue house?" She looked up from her paperwork and her eyes did this quick thing, a sort of flicker. "Green Hill Cemetery," she said. "Yeah, some, not all." "Why?" "I live across from it," I said. "Just curious. There's this grave, kind of off to the side. Little one. I was wondering if it was like a family plot or something." She hesitated, then got up, walked to a metal cabinet, and pulled out a thin folder. She spread a couple of old maps and typed lists on the table. The paper crackled. "Most of the burials there are from late 19th century, she said. "Lots of families. Flu, accidents, that sort of thing." She pointed at a faded diagram with tiny squares and names. "You know which corner?" "Back left," I said. "Right past the broken angel, kind of alone." Her finger hovered over a blank space near the margin of the map. There were names all around it, but that little box had no name, no date, just a number. She frowned. "That one's odd," she said quietly. "We've got entries for most of these, but looks like the record for that plot is missing. Probably misfiled years ago." She gave a short laugh that didn't sound right. "Happens more often than you'd think." "Missing like what?" I asked. "Like they never wrote it down, or..." "Probably just a clerical thing," she cut in. Her tone changed, a little brighter, like she'd switched to customer service mode. She started shuffling papers back into the folder. Sometimes families moved remains, sometimes they didn't. Records from that era aren't perfect. I looked at the map again. Some of the other plots had notes like child age 3 or infant no name, but that one had nothing at all. Was there some kind of event? I tried. Like a big accident or something that would explain why there are so many kids' graves from the same couple of years? She pressed her lips together for a second. There was a mine collapse nearby, back when they were digging out stone, she said finally. Killed a number of men. A few children got sick afterward from conditions. But that's not really documented in detail. People didn't always write down what we'd like them to have written down. She closed the folder and slid it away from me, almost like I'd asked to see something private. If you're interested in local history, we've got some general books over there, she said, gesturing toward a shelf. But there's nothing special about that cemetery. It's just old, that's all. Her eyes said the conversation was over, so I let it go. But on the way home, walking up the hill past the brick wall, I kept glancing at that back corner. The air was colder over there. I know that sounds like something you'd say in a story, but I mean it literally. My breath looked thicker when I turned my head that way. Winter came early that year. Snow piled up along the sidewalks, and the cemetery got that quiet, padded feel to it. The grounds crew came once to shovel the path to the main gate, but they didn't bother going all the way to the back. The broken angel had snow on its head and shoulders. The lone grave in the corner was just a soft rise under white. You'd think the weird stuff would slow down, but it didn't. It just changed texture. One night in January, I woke up because the house felt too silent. You know when the furnace cuts out and you don't hear it anymore and that absence seems louder than the noise? It was like that. The radiator wasn't ticking. The pipes weren't humming. No wind against the windows. No cars on the hill. Just this thick, flat quiet. Then I heard it. Very soft. Not in the room, but close. A sound like someone trying not to cry out loud. Little hitching breaths, the kind kids do when they've been crying for a while and are trying to stop. It wasn't dramatic. It just sounded tired. I lay there on my back, staring at the ceiling. I told myself it was a TV left on somewhere, maybe a neighbor with their volume low. The sound didn't get louder or closer. It stayed at the same level, like it was coming from the next room over or down the hall. Finally, I got up. The floor was cold under my feet. The boards creaked in that slow, complaining way old wood does. I opened my bedroom door, and the sound cut off, just like that. The furnace kicked back on a second later with a low whoomph, and the pipes started their usual knocking. I walked down the hall to Dylan's room. His door was closed, a sliver of light showing under it. I knocked. "What?" he called, voice thick with sleep. "You got your TV on?" I asked. "No," he muttered. "Why?" "Nothing. Go back to sleep." In the kitchen, the digital clock on the stove said 3:12. I checked the front and back doors out of habit. Both were locked. The back door's deadbolt was set, but when I touched it, the metal felt damp. Not just cold, actually damp, like someone had pressed a wet hand around it. I wiped my fingers on my shirt and told myself condensation could do that. Temperature difference. Science. It was in the morning that Dylan noticed the footprints. I came into the kitchen around 8, hair still damp from the shower. He was standing by the back door, barefoot, staring at the floor. "You have tiny feet now?" he said. "What?" He pointed. On the worn linoleum, leading from the back door toward the hallway, were a series of faint, dirty prints. They weren't clear enough to see tread or anything, just darker ovals with a suggestion of toes, smaller than mine or his, closer to a kid's size, the kind of marks you'd get if a child walked in with wet, dirty socks and then took them off halfway through. "We must have tracked something in," I said right away. "Snow, dirt, it dries funny." He squinted at me. "In a straight line from the back door, with the deadbolt set?" I didn't answer that. Instead, I grabbed a rag and wiped them up. It took more effort than it should have. The smell that came up was like damp stone, like the basement of a church I went to as a kid. For the next few days, I avoided looking at that corner grave when I left the house. It's funny how you can train yourself not to look at something that's directly in your line of sight. I'd keep my eyes on the street, or on my phone, or on the sky, anywhere but that spot where the wall dipped and the ground sloped down a little. Of course, that only worked for so long. One evening in late February, we had a thaw. Snow melted into gray slush along the curbs. I came home from a quick grocery run carrying a bag with milk and bread, and for some reason, I stopped across from the cemetery instead of heading straight up to the house. The brick wall was wet, darker in patches where the mortar had soaked up water. The path inside was a mess of slush and mud. And yet, that one patch of ground in front of the lonely grave, it was wet exactly in that same neat oval, darker than everything else, like a fresh stain. No puddles anywhere else. Just there. There were flowers, too. Not the kind you'd buy at a grocery store. Wildflowers or something close. Small, pale things tied together with twine. They were set right at the base of the stone, stems too green for that time of year. No footprints leading to or from them. I stood there with my grocery bag cutting into my fingers and thought, maybe someone comes early, before dawn. Maybe they're careful where they step. Maybe the ground's just weird here. Maybe. I didn't notice the tag until the wind flipped it over. It was a little square of cardstock tucked under the twine. There was writing on it, blurred a bit from moisture, but still legible. One word. A name. It was Dylan's. My throat went dry. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Dylan wasn't exactly an uncommon name. Maybe some distant relative or great-grandparent or something had the same name. Maybe it wasn't even our spelling. I didn't pick it up to look closer. I just turned and walked back to the house, the grocery bag swinging heavily at my side. Inside, I put the milk away and pretended nothing was wrong. Dylan came in a little later, shaking slush off his boots. He didn't mention any flowers. I didn't either. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up and went down to the living room, sat on the couch with a blanket around my shoulders, scrolling on my phone without really seeing anything. Around 11:15, the porch light clicked on by itself, brightening the front windows. The insects outside, what few had started chirping again now that the thaw had come, went silent. I muted the TV and listened. There was this sound. Not loud. Not close. It could have been wind. It could have been a neighbor's radio several houses away. But it had a shape to it, like words just below the threshold of understanding. I sat there, breathing slow, trying to pick them out. After a while, I realized what bothered me most. The sound wasn't coming from the street or from the cemetery side. It felt like it was underneath everything, under the floor, under the foundation, like something in the ground was trying to speak through the house itself. The next day, on my lunch break, I went down to the basement. I don't know what I thought I'd find. Pipes, probably. A leak. Old stone walls sweating moisture. Something simple. The basement was low-ceilinged and smelled like dust and old paint. The single bulb near the stairs barely reached the far wall. I walked over, feeling the concrete under my sneakers. No puddles, no water stains, just cold. I poked around in some old boxes the landlord had left, yellowed newspapers, broken tools, a few folders of house records. In one of them, crammed in with old receipts, I found a brittle piece of paper with an obituary clipped from a very old local paper. Part of the headline was gone, but the rest said enough. A child, age 7, same last name as the woman Marlene had mentioned in passing at the Historical Society. The date was from the same year as most of the kids' graves. The first name made my skin prickle, not because it was strange, because it was mine. Caleb, it said, beloved son, taken too soon, interred at Green Hill. I stood there for a long time in the dim light, listening to the house creak above me. It could have been coincidence, of course. Names repeat. Families recycle them. There's probably another Caleb in town right now. But I thought about the blank square on that cemetery map, the missing record, the grave with the ground that was always wet. Upstairs, something thumped softly, like a cupboard door closing. Then I heard the creak of the screen door. The exact sound it makes when someone opens it from outside. I went up, heart beating too fast for how calm everything was. The kitchen was empty. The front door was closed, but the screen door was moving a little, like it had just swung shut. I put my hand on the knob. It felt damp. Out on the porch, the air was still. The street was empty. Across the way, the cemetery sat under a dull sky. The broken angel leaned forward. The trees were still, branches bare. But that corner grave, its flowers were different. The small wildflowers were gone. In their place was a single white flower I couldn't identify, standing upright in the damp soil, no stem bent by the cold. I could see the little tag clearly from the porch now. The wind had flipped it again. The ink had run, but I could still read my cousin's name. I thought about going over, picking it up, checking the handwriting, bringing it back as proof. But my legs felt stuck. Not frozen, just heavy, like I'd been walking all day. I stayed on the porch, watching, while the wind started to move through the branches above the stones with a soft, steady hiss. Behind me, the furnace kicked on. The radiator in the hallway knocked 3 times. The house settled. I tell myself it's all coincidence. Old pipes, bad wiring, light sensors that misfire. Records get lost, names repeat. Some part of the hill holds water in a strange way. Somebody in town, some old relative, leaves flowers late at night and has a thing for writing names on tags. It's easier that way. I have work in the morning, rent to pay, groceries to buy. Life doesn't stop because you feel watched sometimes when you cross your own living room. Dylan still lives here. He still jokes about the cemetery, though not as much now. Every once in a while, he'll pause by the window and frown, like he's listening to something only he can hear. I don't ask him about it. We've talked once or twice about moving, getting a place with a better furnace and thicker windows and a view of, I don't know, a parking lot instead of gravestones. But rents keep going up, and this house is familiar now. The sounds it makes, the way the light hits the walls at different times of day, the way the porch light sometimes comes on all by itself, shining straight at that back corner of the cemetery. I still walk past the graves on my way to the store. I still cut through sometimes when I'm in a hurry, crunching across the gravel path, nodding at the broken angel without meaning to. And I still tell myself that what I hear on those windless nights is just branches shifting, or neighbors talking, or my own blood in my ears. I think that's why I haven't said anything to anyone else about the flowers, or the tag, or the wet ground that never really dries. It's not that I'm afraid of what's out there. I'm more afraid that one day I'll go out, cross the street, step into that tangled back corner, and find my own name waiting for me. So I don't go. I watch from the porch instead. And from here, even on the coldest mornings, even after weeks without rain, I can tell one thing for sure: the flowers on that grave are always fresh. My name is Daniel, and I'm from Stillwater, Minnesota. I've lived here most of my life, off and on. It's one of those river towns that people pass through on their way somewhere else. Old brick buildings, coffee shops in former hardware stores, a couple of antique places that never seem to close. You can hear the freight trains at night if the wind is right. It's not an exciting place, but it's steady. I like steady. A couple of years ago, I moved back and ended up renting this small 2-story house on a side street up the hill. It's nothing special. White siding, narrow porch, a driveway that's too tight if you're bad at backing up. What makes it stand out is what's across the road. Directly opposite my front porch, there's a small Victorian-era cemetery. I don't mean a big rolling graveyard. This one is pocket-sized, maybe a rectangle the size of a small parking lot. It's got an iron fence with those little spear points on top, and a gate that squeaks when you open it. Near the road, everything looks pretty neat. Short grass, tidy gravel path, a few flower pots with fake arrangements that no one ever seems to replace. But once you get past the first row of stones, the back half goes kind of wild. The grass gets high. There's ivy on some of the markers, and a few headstones lean at odd angles like they're tired. There's a broken angel statue right in the center. It used to have both arms, I guess, but now one is gone and the other is chipped. Someone put it on a little pedestal facing a cluster of family plots. All the stones there have the same surname, carved deep in that old-fashioned font with curly ends. Dates mostly from the late 1800s. A couple from early 1900s. We're talking Victorian-era deaths. The names and dates have that smooth look from a lot of winters. I don't live alone. My housemate is a co-worker, Evan, from my last job in Minneapolis. We worked at the same software company. He needed a place fast after a breakup, and I had the spare room. It wasn't a big emotional decision. He just showed up with a U-Haul and some IKEA furniture, and that was that. For work, I do technical writing, manuals, online help files, that kind of thing. I mostly work from home. That means I sit at the dining table a lot, tapping away on my laptop, staring out the front window when my brain gets stuck. The window has a perfect view right through the thin elms in the yard, across the street, and into the cemetery. I can see most of it without even getting up. It's funny. People always think that would be creepy, but it wasn't. Not at first. At the beginning, it actually felt peaceful. During the day, you'd see older folks walking their dogs along the fence. Sometimes a jogger would cut through the cemetery, shoes crunching on the gravel path as a shortcut. Teens would cut across too, usually with backpacks and those metal water bottles that clank. In the fall, the leaves from the trees over the fence would blow against the iron and pile up along the edge. On calm mornings, you'd get that soft sound of a train horn from down by the river, and the cemetery just sat there, quiet and ordinary. Evenings were our routine. I'd cook something simple, pasta, eggs, whatever, and Evan would bring his laptop out and watch videos at the table. Around 9 or 10, he'd usually step onto the porch to smoke and scroll his phone. You could hear the screen door creak open and slap shut every time. I'd hear him shuffle around out there, the boards under his feet, and then the click of the lighter. He liked to joke about the cemetery. "You picked this place so you'd never have to worry about noisy neighbors," he said once. I said, "Yeah, I figured the folks across the street have a pretty strict quiet hours policy." He smirked. "Wait till they start complaining." He'd make comments like that, but it was just talk. We both slept fine. At first, anyway. It started with little things. One Saturday in early spring, I stepped out to get the mail and saw the cemetery gate hanging wide open. That wasn't unusual by itself. People went in and out. But the thing was, there was no one there. The street was empty. No cars driving by, no people walking dogs. Just that little gate swaying a bit in the breeze, its hinges making this long, tired creak. I could hear the metal clink every time it moved back and forth. I glanced around, didn't see anyone, and just assumed someone had gone through recently. Maybe they'd gone out a back way I couldn't see. I watched for another second, then let it go. The wind picked up and rattled the bare branches in our yard, and the gate settled to a stop half open, like it was waiting on someone. A few days later, I noticed flowers. Not a lot. Just one or two little bunches of fresh white daisies, real ones, not the fake plastic kind. They were stuck in the ground in front of one of the older stones in that family plot by the angel. The dates on that stone were from the 1870s. No plastic cone, no vase. Just stems pushed right into the dirt. I remember staring at them, squinting through the front window. The petals were bright, clean. They looked like they'd just come from a grocery store bouquet. It struck me as odd, because I almost never saw anyone spend much time at that particular grave. You'd get the occasional visitor for some of the more recent plots near the front, sure, but nothing back there. I mentioned it to Evan that night. "Somebody brought flowers for that old grave," I said. He glanced over my shoulder out the window. "That's nice," he said. "Maybe some distant relative finally found them on Ancestry or something." "That specific one, though," I said. "Not the others." He shrugged. "Maybe they liked that one best." I laughed. It was a weird thing to feel unsettled by, and I knew that. People put flowers on graves. That's normal. Another night, maybe a week later, we were watching a movie with the volume pretty low. It was quiet out, except for a neighbor's dog barking a few houses down. Wind was moving through the trees, making that shushing sound. I remember because the porch light flickered once, like the bulb was about to go. Somewhere in all that, I heard something that sounded like my name, soft, like someone half whispered it from outside. Just a faint Daniel, not dramatic, not drawn out, more like someone calling me from the sidewalk and not wanting to be loud. I paused the movie. "What?" Evan said. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" "Someone said my name. Outside." We sat there for a second listening. The dog had gone quiet. The wind died down. It was one of those moments when the house settles and the fridge clicks and every small noise sounds bigger. "I didn't hear anything," he said. "Probably just the movie." "Yeah, maybe," I said. I didn't hit play right away, though. I got up, went to the door, and opened it. The screen door creaked. The porch light buzzed overhead. I stepped out, feeling the night air on my face. Cool, a little damp. The street was empty. Nobody walking. No car engines. Across the road, the cemetery sat still. The iron fence cast a pattern of shadows on the ground. I could see the angel in the center, half lit by our porch light. Nothing moved. I went back inside and told myself I was being weird. The things that came after that weren't dramatic either, not by themselves. The motion sensor on our porch light started going off more often, especially late at night. I'd be in bed reading on my phone and see a flare of light through the curtains. I'd listen for footsteps on the porch or the sound of the screen door, but there'd be nothing. When I looked outside, the street would be empty. Sometimes I heard gravel crunching, the way it does under shoes, from across the street. Not for long, just a step or two, then nothing. A couple of times I stepped onto the porch to see if someone was cutting through the cemetery, but by the time I got out there, everything was quiet. One night when I did that, I noticed the insects had gone completely silent, which you don't get often in summer. Our neighbor's dog, the one that usually barked at any passing car, wasn't making a sound. Evan started talking about it too. "Our light keeps tripping," he said one morning while pouring coffee. I checked the camera on my phone. Didn't see anything. "You checked it?" I asked. "Yeah, I put one of those little Wi-Fi cameras by the porch, remember? It sends alerts when the motion sensor trips. I wanted to catch those kids leaving cans in our yard." "Did it pick up anything?" "I mean, maybe bugs or something," he said. There was a glare once, like a bright smudge, but that's probably just the lens. He said it casual, but I noticed he didn't look at the window when he said it. One Saturday afternoon, I went downtown to the courthouse to check on some property tax stuff. They've got this records room in the basement, fluorescent lights, old filing cabinets, smell of paper and dust. The clerk was an older woman with gray hair pulled into a bun, glasses on a chain. The kind of person who probably knows every parcel of land in town and who owned it going back 50 years. I gave her my address, and she looked it up in the computer. "Oh," she said, "that one." "What does that one mean?" I asked, trying to sound joking. She clicked around and printed something. "Just old," she said. "Been there a long time. That stretch of road used to be the edge of town." "Before they built the cemetery?" I asked. She paused. "The cemetery was there first," she said. I laughed a little. "So my house is newer than the graves across the street?" She didn't laugh. "People forget that," she said. "They think the dead came later, but that hill was for them before it was for anyone else." She pushed the printouts toward me. A map of the lot lines, a note about some minor remodeling done in the 1970s. I saw a line about a prior structure being removed in the early 1900s, but there weren't details. I started to ask, but she was already turning to help someone else. The conversation just ended there. On the way home, I walked past the cemetery instead of going straight up to the house. The wind pushed dry leaves along the sidewalk, making a scraping sound on the pavement. I stopped by the gate. It was standing half open again, swinging just slightly. I could hear the metal squeak. I stepped inside. The gravel crunched under my shoes. The air felt a little cooler in there, but that might have been the shade. I walked past the newer stones near the front and went back toward the angel statue. The base of it was streaked with black stains, probably from rain over the years. Around it, the family stones stood in neat rows, all with the same last name. A few were tilted. One had sunk so far down you could barely read the dates. The grave that had the daisies before had new flowers on it. Different kind this time. Pink carnations, still fresh, stems wrapped in clear plastic. There was no card, no name of who left them. I looked around and didn't see anyone. The neighborhood houses were quiet. No kids outside, no cars passing by right then. I don't know why, but my eyes went to the dates again. The person had died in 1879. Right below the date of death, someone had carved something small in the stone that I hadn't noticed before. It was worn and covered in lichen, but if I leaned in, I could just make out a word: returned. That bothered me. Not in a ghost story way, more in a who chose to carve that on a grave way. It felt like an inside joke you weren't in on. I told myself it might have meant something else, some religious phrase or family saying. Those old Victorians liked dramatic inscriptions. That night, the porch light flicked on 3 separate times after midnight. No cars passed by. I know because I started watching for them, counting the seconds between the sound of tires and the click of the light. Once, when the light went on, the bedroom got just bright enough that I could see the outline of my closet door on the wall. I held my breath without meaning to. The house was completely still. Then I heard footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, not the quick, light steps of somebody running, just a measured crunch of gravel, crossing from the sidewalk to the cemetery gate and then along the path inside. I could track where they were by the sound, and they stopped right about where that angel statue would be. Then nothing. No rustle of clothes, no murmuring, no more gravel. I got up, went to the front window, and parted the curtain a bit. The porch light was still on. I could see the iron fence, the first row of stones, and the dark shape of the trees beyond. My breath fogged the glass a little. There was no one there. A couple of days after that, I noticed something inside the house. When I came down in the morning, there were muddy footprints in the hallway. Not big, not dramatic. Just a faint track leading from the back door, across the worn wood floor, toward the area by the stairs. They were shallow prints, like someone had walked in damp shoes and the dirt had just barely transferred. "Evan," I called. He came out of his room, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah?" "Did you come in late last night?" I asked. "No, I got in around 10. Why?" I pointed to the floor. "Your boots?" He looked down and frowned. "I took them off on the porch," he said. "Did you leave the back door open?" "No," I said. "I locked it before bed." We both stood there, staring at the prints. He followed the line of them, then went to check the back door. The deadbolt was still turned. "Maybe you just forgot and did this yourself," he said after a minute. "Like you came down for water." "I don't drink water at night," I said. "It makes me have to pee." He snorted. "Well, yeah, that's kind of the point." He wiped the tracks away with a damp paper towel and didn't say more. But that night, I heard him get up after I went to bed. The floor creaked in the hallway. The back door's latch made that soft metal click. Things didn't explode after that. It was more like they just kept adding up. Little stuff. Keys I'd leave on the hook by the door would show up on the windowsill facing the cemetery. The upstairs hallway would feel colder than the rest of the house, even with the heat on. Sometimes the radiator pipes would knock in the middle of the night in a way that sounded almost like someone tapping 3 times, pausing, then tapping again. We'd both blame the old plumbing. Once I swear I heard Evan talking to someone downstairs when I woke up around 3 in the morning. His voice was low, like he was trying not to wake me. I couldn't make out the words. I got up and opened my door. The house went quiet. No voices. No TV, just the hum of the fridge and the wind outside, brushing against the siding. The next morning I asked him who he was on the phone with. "I wasn't on the phone," he said. "I heard you," I said. "Around 3. "You sure you weren't dreaming?" he asked. "I mean, I guess I could have been," I said. "It sounded real." He shrugged, but he didn't look up at me. "Maybe the neighbors," he said. Around this time, I started digging into the house's history a little more. It wasn't some big research project. I just got curious, that's all. I went back to the courthouse, and when the clerk was busy, I stood near the shelf that had old binders and ledgers. I found one with early property descriptions for our street. The pages had that brittle yellow look. The entry for my lot mentioned a previous house that had burned down in the early 1900s, and a note about reconstruction completed 1912. Beside that, someone had written a family name, same as the one on the stones around the angel. There was a small notation. "Family plot across lane." I flipped a few pages and found a short note, barely a sentence. "Double interment authorized, 1891. There was no explanation, just those words and the same surname. Double interment, 2 people in 1 grave. I thought of that old headstone with the word returned carved on it, and the fresh flowers no one seemed to place. My hands felt colder holding the paper, even though the room was warm. That night at home, I looked up old local newspapers online. Took a while, but I found a mention of a carriage accident from around that time. A woman thrown, some broken bones listed, died later from complications. The last name matched the family in the cemetery. Someone had underlined the obituary in the scanned image, like at some point a librarian or a relative had drawn attention to it. When I shut the laptop, the room felt too quiet. Our house makes little popping sounds when it cools down, but I noticed every one of them. Somewhere outside, a train horn sounded, long and low. The porch light clicked on, then off again. A week or so later, I was down in the basement looking for some old paint cans the landlord said might be there. The basement is unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed beams, a single pull-chain bulb. The air down there always smells like damp cardboard and dust. In one corner, there were a few old boxes left behind by whoever lived there before us. I almost didn't bother, but curiosity got me. I opened one and found a stack of yellowed folders. Property survey, inspection reports, handwritten notes. Someone had been keeping track of the house's details for decades. Stuff like repair porch steps 1974, replace roof shingles. Near the bottom was a folder labeled cemetery. That seemed odd. I opened it. Inside were photocopies of cemetery plot diagrams. One of them showed the little graveyard across the street as a rectangle, with the family plots marked out near the center. In one square there were 2 names squeezed in, written in different handwriting. Same last name, different first names, different dates. Someone had tried to fit both on the same little box. Next to it, in the margin, was a note. Bodies exhumed for road expansion 1928. Records unclear. Someone had underlined unclear. At the back of the folder was a short letter, typed on old stationery from some county office. It referenced remains discovered matching prior interments and injuries consistent in both. There wasn't enough context to make real sense of it. It read like the middle of a conversation you weren't invited to. I stood down there for a long time just listening. I could hear the faint vibration of a truck passing somewhere outside, muffled through the foundation. Wood creaked above me as the house settled. For a second I thought I heard something else, a soft shifting sound from the corner where the foundation meets dirt, like soil shifting against concrete. But when I turned my head, there was nothing. After that, I started noticing how often Evan mentioned his old accident. It wasn't all the time, just once in a while. A complaint about his leg on rainy days, a joke about the metal plate in his arm setting off airport scanners. He'd broken several bones in a car crash years back before we met. One night when he'd had a couple beers, he described it in more detail than usual. Where it hurt, what the doctors said, the weird way the fractures lined up. It stuck with me. Later, when he'd gone to bed, I found myself sitting at the table with the cemetery diagram spread out, looking at the notes about injuries consistent. I'm not saying I thought there was any literal connection. That'd be crazy. Lots of people break bones. It's just that once you start seeing patterns, it's hard to unsee them. The next time I walked past the cemetery at dusk, the air felt colder, even though it was late summer. A light wind moved through the trees, making the leaves whisper. A crow called from somewhere overhead, then another answered. The gate was closed this time. I could hear the distant sound of a lawnmower from a block over, faint and steady. I looked at that family plot again. The flowers on the one grave were still fresh. Someone was replacing them regularly. I never saw who. I watched the house windows across from me, including my own, all blank, just glass reflecting the sky. A figure stood on a porch 2 houses down, smoking. One of our neighbors, a guy in his 50s who mostly kept to himself. He gave me a nod. I walked over and we made small talk, weather, the city repaving the road, that kind of thing. After a bit, I said, "You know much about that cemetery?" He exhaled smoke slowly. "Enough," he said. "Someone keeps putting flowers on that one grave," I said. "You ever see who?" He looked past me at the stones. His expression changed, but in a subtle way. "Some things just get tended," he said. "By who?" I asked. He shrugged. "Folks who remember," he said. "Or folks who don't realize yet what they're remembering." I frowned. That doesn't really answer the question. He took another drag. "Those graves aren't what you think they are," he said. Then he flicked the ash, turned, and went inside without explaining. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet. Even the usual far-off sounds, the trains, the occasional car on the main road, seemed muted. I lay there on my back, staring at the ceiling. After a while, I heard the porch light click on. A soft electric buzz came through the wall from the fixture. Then I heard the gravel again, slow steps crossing, then stopping. The insects outside went silent. The neighbor's dog, who usually barked at everything, didn't make a sound. From downstairs, very faint, I heard my name, not like the first time. This was softer, almost behind my ear, like someone sitting at the kitchen table saying it while thinking about something else. Just Daniel, the way a person might say it before starting a sentence and then forget what they were going to say. I told myself it was in my head. I really did. I got up, opened my bedroom door, and stood listening in the dark hallway. The wood floor was cool under my feet. The air felt heavier somehow, like a basement that hadn't been opened in a while. There was a dim glow from downstairs. I went down slowly, hand on the rail, trying not to make the boards squeak. When I reached the bottom, I saw the light was coming from the front window. The porch light was on outside, shining in through the glass. On the dining table, my folders were spread out. I hadn't left them like that. The cemetery diagram was on top, and the box with the double names was circled in pen. I didn't remember circling it. Beside it was a slip of paper from the property file, the one with the words double interment and injuries consistent in both. My keys were sitting in the center of the diagram, dead on that family plot square. The back door latch made a small sound, not the full click of someone opening it, just the tiniest shift, like it was settling into place. A moment later, a draft moved through the room. It wasn't strong, just enough to make the papers tremble at the edges. I could feel a slight coldness on the side of my face that was turned toward the kitchen. I stood there, not moving, listening. The fridge hummed. The clock over the stove ticked. I could hear my own breathing. Eventually, the porch light clicked off. The house settled again, the faint crack sound you get when wood adjusts. The air felt less heavy. In the morning, when Evan came down, the papers were stacked neatly, my keys were back on the hook, and the back door was locked. I didn't remember doing any of that. I didn't mention it to him. He didn't mention anything either, except that he'd slept badly and had strange dreams he couldn't remember. Since then, nothing big has happened. Nothing you could take to anyone and have them say, yes, that's proof. It's more like a set of habits that have built up without me meaning to. I don't walk on the gravel path in the cemetery after dark anymore. I used to cut across sometimes to save a few steps coming back from the store, but now I go around. If I wake up and hear the porch light click on, I stay in bed. I tell myself it's just cats or raccoons. The flowers on that grave are always fresh. I've never seen anyone place them there. The gate still swings open some days when no one's around. The clerk at the courthouse doesn't look surprised when I come in, but she doesn't seem eager to help with that file anymore either. I've stopped trying to line up all the dates and names in any meaningful way. It doesn't make me feel better, and it doesn't change the fact that the house was built after the cemetery, not before. That the family name in our paperwork matches the one staring back at us from those stones. That some old note in a file says 2 sets of bones matched in all the wrong ways. Most nights, the house is just a house. We cook, we watch TV. Sometimes we argue about who used the last of the coffee. The cemetery is just across the street, behind its iron fence, with that broken angel watching over everything. The wind moves through the trees. A distant train horn sounds. The screen door creaks when Evan steps out to smoke. But now, when I lock up at night, I always pause at the front window. I look out at the fence and the stones beyond it, and I get this steady, quiet feeling in my chest that I can't shake. It's not panic. It's not even fear exactly. It's more like standing right on a property line and realizing you've been on the wrong side of it longer than you thought. I don't open the window anymore. I don't lean on the sill. I just stand there and watch the fence in the porch light glow. And I think about how someone, a long time ago, chose exactly where to put it. The fence was never meant to keep anyone out. My name is Gregory, and I'm from Camden, Maine. I always feel like I have to start with that, because people hear this and think I'm making it up, or I'm talking about something that happened to somebody else. But it didn't. It was just my regular life, going along like normal, and then it shifted a little. That's all. Just a small shift. I've lived in Camden most of my life. It's one of those coastal towns that looks like it belongs on a postcard. Boats in the harbor, tourists in the summer, too quiet in the winter. I work as a medical billing clerk at the little hospital we've got. It sounds dull, and it mostly is. I sit at a computer, fight with insurance companies, drink bad coffee, and go home. It's not the kind of job you expect to lead into, whatever you'd call this. A couple of years back, I ended up sharing a house with a coworker who needed a place. His name's Mike. He'd broken up with his girlfriend and didn't have anywhere affordable to go, so I said he could take the spare room. We weren't close or anything before that, just, "Hey, how's it going?" in the hallway at work. But we got along fine. He did the dishes without being asked, which already made him better than most roommates I've had. The house sits on a small hill on a side street. Nothing special. White siding, sagging porch. The kind of screen door that never quite closes the first time. What people usually remember about it when I mention it is what's across the road. There's this modest pre-Civil War cemetery right there, close enough that if you stand on my front porch, you can read some of the names on the stones. It's not a big place, just a contained little rectangle of land. There's an old iron fence around it, black and flaking in spots, with a narrow gate that squeaks when the wind hits it just right. Near the center, there's a big willow tree that kind of anchors everything, branches hanging down like a curtain. Up front, near the road, the grass is kept short, and the stones are upright, pretty neat. But the farther back you look, the more things start to go wild. Tangled bushes, leaning stones, some of them halfway sunk into the ground. There's one grave all by itself near the back fence, set apart from the others. First time I noticed it, I thought maybe they just ran out of room and squeezed one more in. When I first moved in, the cemetery just felt peaceful. Not spooky, not haunted, nothing like that. Kids cut through it to get to the next street. Dog walkers went through there too. On summer evenings, I'd sit on the porch with a soda and watch the light go gold over the willow. You could hear chipmunks chattering on the stone wall, crows doing that rough caw from the trees, the occasional distant horn from a boat in the harbor. Nobody looked afraid of that place. My routine was simple. Up at 6, coffee, shower, drive to the hospital, work till 4:30, home by 5. Sometimes I'd stop at the grocery store or the little convenience place on the corner. Dinner was usually something out of the freezer. Mike worked different shifts, sometimes evenings, so there were a lot of nights where it was just me, the TV murmuring in the background, and the sound of the wind moving through the willow branches across the street. It was quiet in that way small towns get quiet when the daytimers go to bed. It started with small things, and I really want to stress that. If it had started big, I don't think I would have handled it the way I did. You can explain away small things. That's what I did, over and over. One Tuesday in October, I remember because the air had that first real bite to it. I came home and noticed the iron gate to the cemetery was standing wide open. That wasn't unusual by itself. Kids sometimes forgot to close it. What caught my eye was that I'd watched a woman walk her dog through there that morning before work. I'd been late, and I'd looked out the window while I was tying my shoes. I'd seen her close the gate behind her. I'm sure of it. But now it was open. I figured somebody else had come along during the day and not bothered, so I walked over, pushed it shut, and listened to it clank. As I turned back, I noticed flowers on one of the older graves. Bright yellow mums, fresh, still damp, like they'd just been watered. The stone they were next to had a date in the 1840s on it. I thought maybe there was some history group in town that did that sort of thing, honoring old graves. I didn't think about it again. A few nights later, around 9, I was on the couch, half watching some crime show, when the motion sensor light over the front steps clicked on. It shines out toward the road and hits part of the cemetery fence. I muted the TV and listened. Didn't hear a car, didn't hear footsteps on the gravel. The only sound was the wind going through the willow and the faint hiss of the radiator starting up. After a minute, I got up, opened the front door, and pushed the screen door out just far enough to peek. The light was on, bright white on the porch and making the iron fence throw these thin shadows on the road. Across the street, everything was still. No person, no animal. Just the willow branches moving slow and the leaves scraping along the pavement. It was probably a stray cat, I told myself. They cut through the yard all the time. I went back in, let the screen door bang shut, and turned the TV up a little louder. Mike was the one who started joking about the cemetery. Once he got settled in, he'd sit with a beer on the porch and say, "Rent's cheap because we've got quiet neighbors." Or, "If you see anyone across the street after midnight, don't wave back." Regular stuff. Sometimes he'd swear he heard voices out there late, like people talking low. But when I went out to listen, all I heard was the wind and, now and then, some dog barking a few streets over. I told him sound carries weird at night. He agreed. That was that. The first thing that really stuck with me happened on a Sunday morning. It was one of those gray, foggy mornings we get here, where the harbor disappears and everything feels damp. I went out to grab the mail I'd forgotten the day before, and the fog was low enough that the tops of the stones across the street looked like they were floating. As I was walking back up the driveway, I heard this sound. At first, I thought it was a truck engine idling somewhere, this low, steady whoosh. But it didn't have that rattling edge engines have. It was more like, I don't know, like someone blowing air through their teeth. I stopped and turned toward the cemetery. It seemed to be coming from the back half, where the grass is higher and the stones lean. I stood there, squinting into the fog, and the sound kept going. In, out, a slow, shallow rhythm. It didn't get louder or softer, just steady. The hair on my arms stood up, and I felt stupid for that. It's nothing, I told myself. Maybe it's the wind going around the stones in a weird way, like a bottle. I stood there another minute. Then, just as I started to take a step toward the road, it stopped. Cut off clean. No fading, no blending back into the background. Just gone. By the time I got inside, I talked myself into the wind explanation. Fog messes with sound too, I figured. I made coffee, turned on the radio, and tried to forget about it. But that sound stuck in my head all day, like when a song gets stuck and won't go. Over the next couple of weeks, little things kept happening. I'd come home and find the gate open again, even though I know I'd seen it closed that morning. Fresh flowers appeared on different old graves, always old ones, from the 1800s or early 1900s. Sometimes it'd be a single white carnation in a little glass jar. Sometimes a small bunch of wildflowers tied with twine. Always fresh. I never saw anyone placing them. One evening, right after daylight savings time ended, I was on the porch when the street felt wrong. There's not a better word for it. It was one of those still nights where the air just hangs. No wind, no cars going by. Even the insects were quiet. Usually you can at least hear a few late crickets, but it was just dead air. I realized after a minute that I was waiting for something. For what? I didn't know. The porch light flickered once. That little hum dropping and coming back. Across the road, under the willow, I thought I saw the grass move. Not like wind through a field, more like the ground itself rose and fell. Just a fraction. Breathing. I blinked, and it was still again. Probably my eyes playing tricks, I told myself. I went inside and locked the door, which is something I never bothered doing before 9 or 10. Mike started mentioning things too. One night he came in from a smoke break on the porch and said, "You ever notice that one grave way in the back? The lonely one by the fence?" "Yeah," I said. "Kinda hard to miss." "I swear it wasn't there when I first moved in," he said. "Like, I know that sounds stupid, but I think it's, I don't know, taller than it used to be." "It's a stone, man," I said. "It's not growing." "Yeah, I know," he said, rubbing his hands together. "Just feels weird back there, like the ground's soft." We laughed about it. We always laughed first. That's something I've noticed about anything that really scares you. It usually gets a laugh the first time. You have to push it away somehow. Around then, I got curious about the place, but in a normal way. Historical. One afternoon on my way back from lunch, I stopped by the local historical society. It's in this old brick building near the library. Smells like paper and dust. There was a woman at the desk, gray hair pulled back tight, name tag that said Marjorie. "Hey," I said, "do you guys have any records on the cemetery over on?" And I gave her my street. Her eyes flicked up quick, then down. "Which one?" she said, even though there's only the one there. "The little one with the iron fence and the big willow," I said. "We've got general cemetery records," she said, not quite looking at me. "Not much by street. What do you need it for?" I shrugged. "I live across from it. Just curious, I guess. Some of the stones are so old I can't read them." She hesitated, then pulled a worn binder from a shelf behind her. The label said, "Burials, East Side." She flipped through for a second, then stopped, frowning. "That one," she said slowly, "should be in here. But I'm not seeing it. Maybe it's filed under the church it used to belong to. I can check the back room later." She closed the binder and slid it away from me a little. "Come back another time." She said it in this final way, like the conversation was over. I remember standing there, feeling like I'd done something wrong without knowing what. I thanked her and left. Every time I passed that building after, I thought about going in to ask again, but I never did. The disturbances kept coming in little bits. The porch lights started clicking on every so often in the middle of the night. I'd wake up, see the glow under my bedroom door, and listen. Once or twice I got up and went to the front window, lifting the curtain with 2 fingers. Every time the yard was empty. The motion sensor might have been failing. That's what I told myself. Those things go bad. One night, I woke up around 2 and realized the usual sounds of the house were wrong. You get used to your own place, you know? The refrigerator hum, the way the wood pops in the walls, the radiator knocking when it comes on. That night, it was just nothing. I could hear my own breathing, but nothing else. No wind, no cars, no distant dog. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Then, faint as could be, I heard it again. That shallow in and out, like air moving through tight spaces. Breathing, but not from a person in the room. More like it was coming up through the floorboards. I lay there, staring at the ceiling in the dark, counting the breaths. They matched mine at first. Then they didn't. They sped up a little as I tried to slow mine down. Finally, I sat up and turned on the lamp. The sound stopped dead. The next morning, there was dirt on the hallway floor. It wasn't a lot. just a soft, dusty smear along the baseboard near the front door, like somebody had tracked it in and brushed against the wall. The color of it was off, darker than the sandy soil in my yard, closer to that heavy, rich earth you see when someone's dug deep. I checked the bottom of my shoes, then Mike's, lined up by the mat. Clean. "Did you go out last night?" I asked him over coffee. "Nope," he said. "You?" "No." He looked at the dirt, shrugged. "Maybe you dragged it in yesterday and just didn't notice." "Maybe," I said. I got the broom and swept it up carefully. It left a faint smear, like a shadow, even after I mopped. After that, the line between out there and in here started to feel thinner. I'd find the deadbolt unlocked in the morning when I was sure I'd turned it. A picture on the wall would be slightly crooked. Not much, just enough that you had to ask yourself if it was always like that. Once I came home and found the screen door standing wide open, but the main door was shut and locked. That one bothered me more than I let on. Mike admitted he was hearing things too. One evening, he came into the kitchen while I was making pasta, looking pale. "I heard you calling me," he said. "I didn't call you," I said. I was alone in the house. He'd just come in. "Downstairs," he said. "I was in my room, and I heard you go, 'Mike, come here a sec,' like right at the bottom of the stairs. So I came up, but you were in here with the water running." "Maybe you heard the TV," I said, even though it was off. He shook his head. "No, it was you. Like, your voice, same tone and everything." We stared at each other for a second. Then I said, "Well, now you know how it feels. I heard you snoring in the living room last night and you weren't even home." He laughed, and that broke it. We made a joke out of it. "House is bored," he said. "Keeps playing us off each other." But I noticed after that, he stopped going out on the porch alone after midnight. On a windy day in November, I finally walked over to the back part of the cemetery. The sky was low and dull, and the iron gate complained loud when I opened it. Gravel crunched under my shoes as I crossed the front, then gave way to softer ground as I got deeper in. The air smelled like wet leaves and something older underneath, that sweet, moldy dirt smell. I passed stones with lambs carved on them, little children's graves with dates so old they barely meant anything to me. 1843, 1861. Some of the names were worn to nothing, just traces under lichen. Under the willow, the ground dipped slightly, as if the tree had pulled the land down around it. The grave by the back fence was simpler than I expected. No angel, no statue, just a narrow, weathered stone, a little taller than the others. The inscription was surprisingly clear, like the rest of it had aged, but the letters hadn't gotten the memo. There was a first name, a last name, and a date. I won't repeat the name here. That's the one thing I almost never say out loud. The death year was 1851. Underneath, in smaller letters, it said something like, "Taken too soon," or "at rest." I don't remember the exact phrase now, which is strange, considering how clearly I remember everything else. What I do remember is the way the earth at the base of the stone didn't look settled. It had a faint, uneven rise to it, a softness, like someone had just filled it in. It made no sense. This grave should have been settled for more than 150 years. I stood there and watched it. This sounds crazy, I know, but as I watched, very slowly, the soil seemed to lift, just a fraction, as if something underneath pushed up against it. Then it sank back, leaving the faintest line where a clod of earth had cracked. You could have told me it was my eyes, the clouds, the wind, anything. I would have believed you. I wanted to believe anything else. I knelt down and put my hand just above the surface, not touching, maybe an inch away. The air there felt warmer, just a little, warmer than the rest of the ground around it. I pulled my hand back like I'd almost touched a burner by mistake. On the walk back home, the wind picked up, pushing against my back. The iron fence rattled, and a crow screamed once from a tree somewhere I couldn't see. As I reached my driveway, all the sounds cut off again. No wind, no birds, no passing cars, just my shoes on the gravel and my own pulse in my ears. That night, I dreamed I was in a pine box, feeling nails go in overhead. I woke up with my hands pressed flat above me like I was trying to push something away. My ceiling light flickered once, then steadied. Downstairs, I heard the front door creak as if it had just been closed gently. I got up, went down, and checked. The door was locked, chain on, deadbolt turned. But when I reached for the handle, I felt it, cold, gritty, like someone with dirt under their nails had just gripped it hard. I turned on the porch light and opened up. The yard was empty. Across the street, the willow branches swayed just a little, even though I couldn't feel any wind on my face. The next day was a work day, which helped. You can bury a lot of things under routines. I filed claims, argued over codes, listened to coworkers talk about their kids. At lunch, Mike and I sat in the break room. He stared at his sandwich and said real quiet, "Hey, does that cemetery have my last name in it anywhere?" I looked up. "Why?" "I had this dream," he said. "I was standing in there, and you were on the other side of the fence, and you kept saying my name, like you were reading it off a list. And every time you said it, it sounded wrong, like it wasn't mine. Just check. Next time you're out there, okay?" "Sure," I said. My mouth felt dry. I did check, later. I walked the rows with my hands in my jacket pockets, pretending I was just out for some air. There were a few stones with his first name, but not his last. When I got near the back fence, I felt that little push under my feet again, like the ground wanted to rise. I didn't go all the way back to the lonely grave. I didn't want to see if the stone there matched anything in my own life. A week or so after that, we had a storm. Wind howled all night, rain slapped the windows, the whole house shook. The screen door banged until I finally got up to wedge a chair against it. Sometime late, maybe 3 in the morning, the power snapped off. The house went from loud to quiet so fast it made my ears ring. In the dark, with no fridge hum, no heater, nothing, I heard it again. That breathing. But this time, it wasn't through the floor. It was in the hallway, just outside my bedroom door. Slow in, slow out, like someone standing there, trying not to be heard. I told myself it was the wind in the walls, the way old houses do. I told myself that over and over. I didn't get out of bed. I just lay there, staring at the faint outline of the door, listening. After what felt like 10 minutes, maybe more, there was a soft sound lower down, like bare feet stepping once on wood, then nothing. In the morning, the power was back. Mike was already up, sitting at the table with his coffee, not drinking it. "You hear that last night?" he asked. "The wind?" I said. He shook his head. "Somebody walked past my room. Twice. I thought it was you. But they didn't stop when I called, didn't answer, just kept going." I didn't say what I'd heard. I just sat down and wrapped my hands around my mug like I was cold. The funny thing is, the house itself didn't feel cold. The thermostat said 70. But there was this pocket of cold near the front door. If you walked past, just there, the air felt a few degrees lower, like you'd opened a freezer for a second. It went on like that, a little worse each week. Flowers kept appearing on old graves, always fresh, even when the weather turned. The gate across the street would be open in the morning. swinging just a little, even on still days. The soil around that back grave held on to frost longer than the rest, a white ring when everything else had melted. Once, just once, at dawn, I saw the ground around it bulge, then settle, like something rolling over underneath. I started noticing my own name in places it shouldn't have been. On the receipt from the gas station, printed twice. On a patient list at work, even though nobody with my name had checked in. On a junk mail envelope addressed to the estate of Gregory, and then my last name. Clerical errors, I told myself. Computer glitches. No big deal. I went back to the Historical Society one more time. Marjorie looked up, saw me, and her face did this tight little thing. "It's still not there," she said before I even asked. "Those records. I checked the church archives and the town books. There's gaps for that plot. People got sloppy back then." "So you know which plot I mean," I said. "There's nothing special about that cemetery," she said, too fast. "It's just old. You live across from it. You're going to notice things. That's all." She picked up a stack of papers and started sorting them like I wasn't there anymore. On my way out, as my hand was on the door, she said, not looking up, "Those graves aren't what you think they are." Her voice was so low I almost missed it. I turned back. "What do you mean?" She shook her head. I didn't say anything. Her eyes were fixed on the papers. I left. The realization didn't come in a flash. It came in pieces, like junk mail you keep meaning to throw away but never do, until one day you look at the pile and admit it's there. The dirt in the hallway that came back no matter how often I cleaned. The way the house went silent at the same time the bugs outside stopped singing. The porch light clicking on with nothing visible in the yard, but footprints of dark, damp earth drying in faint outlines on the boards. You'd think the worst of it would be seeing something, but I never did. Not really. The worst was hearing my own voice when I was alone. Standing in the kitchen and hearing myself call from the foyer, lying in bed and hearing myself say my own name from the front porch, voice muffled by the door. Every time I went to check, nobody was there, but the doorknob would be just a little warm, or just a little cold, or have that faint dirt feeling again. One evening in early spring, I was sorting through an old box of family papers my mother had given me. Birth certificates, a yellowed marriage license, a couple of obituaries clipped from newspapers. I was sitting at the table, sun going down, porch light not on yet. Outside, I could see the willow moving in the breeze and the stones catching that last weak light. I unfolded a crumbling document I didn't recognize, some kind of old land record from the mid-1800s. The ink faded, but still readable if you squinted. It mentioned a small burial ground on the east side of town, an iron fence, a willow tree, recently planted, and a family name. The same last name that was on my own birth certificate. Further down, in smaller writing, there was a note. It wasn't part of the official wording. It looked like something someone had added later. It just said, "Not all laid to rest agreed to it." The room felt suddenly smaller. I set the paper down carefully. My eyes slid, just once, to the front window. Through the glass, in the dim, I could see the outline of the cemetery gate. It was standing open. Behind me, in the hallway, a floorboard creaked. Not like the house settling, not that slow, complaining groan. A short, sharp sound, like someone had shifted their weight. "Mike?" I said, without turning around. He was on the late shift. I knew that. I'd dropped him off myself. The house went quiet. Even the refrigerator seemed to stop for a second. Outside, the wind eased off. No cars passed, no dogs barked. The willow branches stilled, hanging straight down. I stayed seated at the table, hands flat on either side of the document, and I didn't turn around. I just listened. After a while, the breathing started up again somewhere behind me, shallow and patient, like whoever it was had all the time in the world. I still don't know who it is. I don't know if it's someone from the graves, or someone who never made it to one, or something else entirely. Maybe it's nothing but the house and my own head, feeding off each other. Maybe the records got lost for a reason. Maybe that stone in the back isn't as old as it claims to be. I change my habits a little, that's all. I keep the curtains drawn at night now. I don't walk in the cemetery anymore. I try not to say my own name out loud when I'm alone. And every evening when it starts to get dark, I look at the fence across the street to see if the gate is open or closed. The funny thing is, it doesn't really matter which way it is. The fence was never meant to keep anyone out. My name is Laura, and I'm from Stillwater, Minnesota. I always feel like I have to start there, because if you know this town, you know it's not the kind of place where people talk about whatever this is. It's old riverfront brick and antique shops and kids on bikes, not horror stories. People come here to eat ice cream by the water, go on those little paddle wheel boats, look at leaves in the fall. It's nice. It's quiet. That's kind of the point. I moved back a few years ago, after my mom got sick. I'd been living in the cities for a while, doing pretty much the same job I do now. Medical billing clerk for a big clinic group, staring at codes and insurance denials all day. When she passed, the house felt too big for my dad, and I didn't really like driving up and down the highway every weekend to check on him, so I ended up back here. I rented this half of a duplex up the hill, a little ways from Main Street. It's an old place, creaky floors and all, but solid. The kind of rental where the windows stick in the winter and the radiators knock at odd hours. But the rent's cheap and the landlord mostly leaves you alone. My cousin Kelsey moved in with me the year after. She'd gotten a job at the community college over in White Bear, doing something with student services, and she needed a place while she figured out if it was going to be permanent. We weren't super close growing up, but we got along. She's the kind of person who can talk to anybody. The kind of person who walks into a coffee shop and somehow comes out knowing the barista's whole life story. I'm not like that. I'm fine being in my own head, you know. Between work and paying bills and trying to remember to buy groceries, that's enough. The thing everybody always reacts to when they visit is the cemetery. If you stand on my front porch and look straight across the street, you're looking through an iron fence at rows of old stones. It's right there. Not a huge place. Small, really. Maybe 2 long blocks if you walked it end to end. It's one of those Victorian-era cemeteries where the stones are higher and thinner and have those old-fashioned names on them. Some of the markers tilt. Some lean against each other like they're tired. Near the entrance, it looks pretty neat. Gravel path, little sign with the name and the dates, grass mowed down low. But once you get past the front, toward the back half, it goes kind of wild. The grass gets taller, and there's this patch where the ground dips and rises, like it doesn't quite remember where it's supposed to be. I grew up in Stillwater, so cemeteries don't feel that creepy to me. We used to cut through the big one on the south end of town on our way to the library. You're supposed to be respectful, obviously, but after a while it just becomes part of the scenery. Stones, trees, names, dates. The one across from my house is old. Some of the markers go back to the 1870s, and a lot of the last names match the streets around here. It's like a phone book from another century. Kind of comforting in a weird way. Like the town's all in one place if you wanted to see it. The first few months I lived there, the cemetery was just background. I'd sit on the porch on summer nights with a glass of iced tea, listen to the crickets, smell somebody grilling a few houses down, and look at the way the last light hit the tops of the stones. Cars don't come up my street much, so it's mostly quiet except for the river sound if the breeze is right, or a distant train horn. Sometimes a dog would start barking a few blocks away and another one would answer. Normal stuff. If a wind came through, I'd hear it move through the old maple by the corner of the cemetery, leaves dragging against the iron fence with that soft scraping sound. Peaceful. When Kelsey moved in, she stood on the porch with her suitcase and said, "You didn't mention you live across from a haunted movie set." "It's not haunted," I said. "It's historic. There's a difference." She laughed. "Yeah, that's exactly what a haunted person would say." That was her thing. She'd make little jokes about our neighbors across the street, or she'd wave out the window when she pulled the blinds shut at night. If we walked home after dark, she'd nod toward the gate and say, "Evening, everyone," under her breath. It wasn't mean. Just her way of making it less serious, I think. My schedule was pretty standard. I worked from home 3 days a week and went into the clinic office 2 days. Working from home meant I spent more time looking out the front window than I should have. I'd sit at the dining table with my laptop, and between claims and appeal letters, I'd glance up and see the light move across the stones as the day went on. The cemetery people came every so often. Old guy with a small mower, couple of younger ones hauling brush to a truck. I'd see the groundskeeper most often. Older guy, but strong, with a faded green ball cap and a limp in one leg. He wore the same brown jacket even when it was warm and drove this little utility cart around inside the fence. He'd nod if he saw me on the porch. We never really talked. For a long time, that was it. It was just where I lived. House, cousin, cemetery. Quiet street. Groceries on Saturday, laundry Sunday night, work in between. You get into a groove and stop thinking about where you are. Most of what happened, looking back, was small. Small enough that at the time, I didn't think of it as anything. The first thing I noticed was the gate. There's an old iron gate at the front, right across from my porch steps. It doesn't lock, but it hangs heavy and doesn't swing easily. You have to give it a little shove, and it scrapes the gravel when you drag it back. In the evenings, when the groundskeeper left, he'd always swing it closed. I know that because sometimes I'd be out on the porch and I'd watch him do it, that automatic end-of-the-day motion. One morning, early fall, I was sitting at the table with my coffee, half reading emails, and I glanced up and saw the gate standing wide open. The rest of the place looked untouched. No trucks, no people, same long shadows. But the gate was just hanging there like it was supposed to be that way. I got up and looked at the road. No funeral procession, no cars, nothing. Just that gate pulled open like someone was about to drive in. I told myself, the groundskeeper must have left it overnight by mistake. People forget things. I forget things every day. By lunchtime, the gate was closed again. I hadn't heard anyone cross the street. Hadn't heard that iron scrape. I figured I just missed it while I was in the bathroom or something. It happened again a few days later. This time on a windy morning. I thought, okay, it's just the wind. It catches things. He probably didn't latch it all the way, and a gust pushed it open. Still, I remember standing there with my mug in my hand, looking at that open gate and feeling this little flick of, not fear exactly, just that feeling when something's slightly out of place in a way you can't fix from where you're standing. When I mentioned it to Kelsey that night, she shrugged. "Maybe it's like their shift change," she said, nodding toward the cemetery while she stirred a pot of pasta. "Morning rush hour, everybody clocking in to haunt the town." I rolled my eyes. "You're not helping." "It's a gate," she said. "It opens, it closes. This is very low-level spooky." She wasn't wrong. And for a while, that's all it was. A gate that sometimes was open in the morning when I knew it should have been closed. I started checking more. Like I'd go to bed and glance through the window. Closed. Get up at 6:30. Open. Not every day. Maybe once or twice a week. Enough to notice. Not enough to make a big deal about. The second thing was the flowers. There's one grave near the back that's set apart from the rest. You can see it from the porch if you look past the front rows, and let your eyes adjust to that darker part where the grass gets thicker. It's not on the gravel path. It sits alone, a little to the side, like somebody forgot to put it in the right place. The stone is shorter and squatter than the others, with a rounded top. I can't read the name from my porch, but I can tell the year carved at the bottom, 1883. The stone leans just a little, like a person with a bad hip. One afternoon in October, when the air had that dry leaf smell, I glanced up from my screen and saw a bright patch of color at the base of that stone. I squinted, pushed my glasses up. Flowers. A small bunch, just enough to make a spot of red and yellow in all that faded green and gray. That wasn't strange by itself. People leave flowers all the time. But there was something about that grave. I had this vague sense I'd never seen anything on it before, not even on Memorial Day, when the local veterans group came through and put flags and little plastic bouquets on the soldier graves. That one always looked bare, just the crooked stone in the grass. The odd part was that I hadn't seen anyone go in. No car, no footsteps on the gravel, no sound of the gate, nothing. One minute the stone was bare, the next time I looked, the grave had flowers. Maybe I'd just missed them. Maybe they'd been there all morning, and I only now noticed. That's what I told myself. People can walk faster than you think. You can be looking at your phone and miss a whole person crossing your field of view. By the time I remembered to mention it to Kelsey, a couple days had passed. "You're turning into one of those old ladies who spies on the neighbors," she said, grinning around a forkful of leftover pizza. "Just start knitting on the porch. Complete the vibe." "I'm not spying," I said. "I'm just saying, someone's visiting a grave back there. It's kind of sweet." "See? You're soft," she said. "Haunted soft." We joked like that. It kept it light. The truth is, those little things didn't feel like anything yet. They stacked up in the back of my mind the way you stack junk mail on the counter. You keep meaning to sort it, but you don't, and it just sits there. It didn't stay small, though. Little by little, it started to feel like the cemetery and the house were paying attention to each other. The first time I heard it, I was alone. Kelsey was working late, and I'd stayed home, wrapped in a blanket on the couch with my laptop. It was November by then. The air had that early dark to it, and you could hear the furnace kick on and off under the floor like a big animal breathing. I remember because I'd paused some show and was just sitting there, not thinking about anything, when I heard footsteps. Not pounding, not running, just a slow crunch of gravel, one step at a time from across the street. You know how sound carries at night? It was like that. I could hear each shift of stone under a shoe, the way you can tell when someone's walking on rock instead of pavement. I turned the TV volume down and sat there, listening. The sound moved from the front gate inward, like somebody walking along the path. Then it stopped. No car door, no voice, no metal of the gate closing again. Just footsteps in, then nothing. After a minute, I told myself it was just the groundskeeper doing something, even though it was almost 10 and I'd never seen him there that late. Or maybe it was some kids cutting through. People cut through places all the time. I went to bed and didn't think much about it. Except it kept happening. Not every night. Sometimes 3 nights in a row, then nothing for a week. Always late after 9, usually closer to 10:30 or 11. I'd be in the living room or downstairs switching laundry, and I'd hear those same careful steps on gravel. Never running, never talking, never more than one at a time. Just a single person stride going in, stopping somewhere in the middle. And I almost never heard them come back out. I didn't say anything to Kelsey about it at first, because I didn't want her to start with the jokes again, and because it sounded silly, even in my own head. "Hey, I keep hearing someone walk into the cemetery and vanish." People don't love that kind of conversation. She was the one who brought it up. We were getting ready for work one morning, doing that awkward dance in the bathroom doorway because the house isn't really built for 2 adults. She was brushing her teeth, hair up in a sloppy bun, toothpaste foam in the corner of her mouth. "I heard your ghost last night," she said. "What?" I said. I was half asleep, wrestling with a contact lens. "The gravel," she said, making a little stepping motion with her fingers down the edge of the sink. "Crunch, crunch, you know, from the graveyard." I blinked at her. "You heard it too?" "Yeah," she said. "Like, right when I was falling asleep, someone walking in from the road. I thought it was your landlord or something. He doesn't live here," I said. "Well, I figured. I wasn't going to get out of bed and check," she said. "I like having eyes in the morning." We kind of laughed it off. But later, at my desk, with my headset on and a spreadsheet open, all those little pieces started lining up in my head. The gate, the flowers, the footsteps that never led back out. None of it meant anything by itself. Together, it made a shape I didn't like. I finally asked the groundskeeper about it in the most casual way possible. It was a Saturday, and I'd walked over with a rake to deal with some leaves that had blown against the curb in front of the house. He was near the fence, trimming some low branches off a shrub. Up close, I could see the cemetery better, the mix of old and slightly newer stones, the way the grass went from short to long without a neat line. There were these family plots, too, with the same surname carved on several stones in a row, all clustered together. "Morning," I said. He looked up, wiped his forehead with the back of his glove, and nodded. "Morning." I hesitated, then jerked my chin toward the field of stones. "Busy over there?" He made a small sound that might have been a laugh. "Always busy, just not in ways you'd notice." I smiled the way you do when you're not sure if someone's joking. Uh-huh. We talked about the weather for a second. Then I said, "Hey, do people come in here late at night sometimes? I've, heard footsteps. Thought maybe there were visitors after hours." His face changed a little. Not a big shift, just a tightening around the eyes and mouth. "Not supposed to," he said. "Gates closed at dusk." "Yeah, I know," I said. "I'm just saying, sometimes it's open in the morning. I see it from the window." "Huh," he said. He glanced at the gate, then back at me. "Probably kids. You know how they are. Nothing better to do than sneak around where they don't belong." "Yeah, probably," I said. He went back to his trimming, and that seemed like the end of it. But as I turned to go, he added, without looking at me, "If you hear him again, you just stay inside. Don't go out trying to scare him off or anything. Not worth the trouble." It wasn't what he said exactly. It was the way he said them, like it covered more than just teenagers. I went back to my side of the street feeling colder than the air warranted. There was one more thing I'd noticed by then. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone because it felt obsessive, I guess, like I was paying too much attention. That grave in the back, the one that sits off by itself. I started looking for it on purpose when I opened the curtains in the morning. It became this weird little check-in, like checking my email. There it would be, slightly tilted, stone gray against the darker grass. Sometimes it had flowers, sometimes it didn't. I never saw anyone bring them, and I never saw anyone take them away. But the arrangements changed, colors, shapes, levels of freshness. And every once in a while, the ground at its base looked different, looser, darker, like the grass had been disturbed and laid back down, not like an open hole or anything dramatic, just a subtle difference in shade and texture, like someone had pressed their hands into the earth and smoothed it out again. I know how that sounds. But dirt looks a certain way when it hasn't been touched for a long time. And it looks another way when it's been lifted and put back. You don't have to be a groundskeeper to see that. You just have to be someone who spends too much time staring out their front window instead of doing their job. Kelsey was the one who called it the grave that won't stay put. She said it as a joke. One night when we were on the couch and I made the mistake of saying something about the dirt. "You're saying it's like restless?" she said, wiggling her fingers in the air theatrically. "Like it needs a weighted blanket?" "Shut up," I said, but I was laughing. "I'm serious. It looks like someone's messing with it." "Probably some goth teenagers trying to summon whatever," she said. "I mean, look at it. If you were going to pick one grave to be creepy about, that'd be the one. Off all by itself, leaning like it's trying to get your attention. It's got main character energy." "You're the worst," I said. But that phrase stuck in my head later. The grave that wouldn't stay put. The thing that pushed it out of the weird joking about this category and into, I have to admit I'm actually not okay, happened about a month later, in December. Snow had started by then. Not the big drifts yet, just those early blankets that melt and refreeze and make everything slick. The stones across the street looked shorter with white piled up around their bases. The iron fence had frost clinging to it that glittered under the streetlight at night. The cemetery got quieter in an odd way. Sound travels differently over snow. It's like the world gets muffled, except for the sharp sounds, car tires crunching, a branch cracking under ice. I woke up around 2 a.m. one night, not sure why. The heat had kicked off, so the house had that still, heavy silence. I lay there for a minute listening. Then I heard it, the faintest scrape and thud from downstairs. Not like someone knocking, more like something soft landing on the floor. I told myself it was the cat, and then remembered we don't have a cat. I lay there, heart doing that thing where it beats in your throat. I waited for another sound. After a while, I talked myself down. Old houses settle. Radiators knock. Sometimes ice slides off the roof. I almost fell back asleep. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow. One at a time. The sound of a weight you could feel in your bones. Not heavy, but definite. Wood creaking under it. I stared at the crack of the door where the hallway light would be if it were on. It stayed dark. The footsteps stopped halfway up. "Kes?" I said, my voice all sand. No answer. I swallowed, found my phone on the nightstand, and thumbed the flashlight on. The screen lit up my own face first, pale and wide-eyed in the black. I slid off the bed, opened the bedroom door. The hallway was empty. The nightlight at the end glowed a weak blue near the bathroom. I could hear Kelsey's soft snore through her door, the way she always sounded a little congested in winter. There was nothing on the stairs, nothing on the landing. I stood there, bare feet on the cold wood, feeling stupid for being scared. I told myself maybe I'd imagined it, part of some half-dream from when I'd been waking up. I went back to bed. The next morning, when I went downstairs to make coffee, there were little clumps of dirt on the floor just inside the back door. Rich, dark soil. Not a ton. Just enough to see where something had been and shaken loose. We don't use the back door much. It sticks in the frame and you have to fight with it. We come and go through the front. Nobody had come in that way the night before. There are no plants right by the door. No potted trees for it to have fallen out of. The mat was clean. The dirt was past it, like someone had walked in and taken 2 steps before it dropped. I stood there with the coffee scoop in my hand, just looking at it. The smell hit me next. Earthy, that damp, underground smell you get when you first dig into a garden after a rain. Except it hadn't rained. It had snowed. "Kelsey," I called. My voice cracked, and I hated that. She came down in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "What?" I pointed. "Do you see that?" She squinted at the floor. "You spilled potting soil or something?" "We don't have potting soil," I said. She frowned. walked closer, nudged one of the clumps with her toe. "Huh, maybe you tracked it in?" "From where?" I said. "There's snow, and I didn't go outside last night." She looked at me then, properly, and I could see the moment the joke died before she could make it. "Okay," she said. "That's weird." We cleaned it up. Because what else do you do? She made some comment about maybe the landlord coming by and not telling us, even though that didn't make sense. We both pretended that explanation was good enough and went to work. The footsteps got worse after that. Or I got more aware of them. I don't know. I started hearing them in the evenings, not just at night, and not just on gravel. Sometimes I'd be in the kitchen, and I'd hear them crossing the front porch. 2 steps up, boards creaking, weight shifting, the sound of someone standing right outside the door. If I went to look, nobody was there. The porch light would flicker once, maybe twice, then steady. Kelsey heard them too. Once, when I was out at the store, she texted me, "Your ghost is on the porch, FYI." When I got home, she told me she'd been in the living room, heard the steps, and called out, "We're not interested in religion, thanks," thinking it was one of those people who go door to door. No answer. Just the board settling and then nothing. "You didn't look?" I said. She shrugged, but her eyes were tight. Didn't feel like meeting whoever that was. I started leaving the front curtains half closed at night, so I couldn't see straight out onto the street. It made me feel safer, even if it didn't change anything. Light from the TV would catch in the glass and show my own reflection instead of the dark. I convinced myself that was better. One Saturday I went down to City Hall, which is just this old brick building a few blocks off Main, to do something normal. Renew my car tabs. While I was there, with that stale paperwork smell in my nose, I thought about the cemetery. On a whim, I asked the clerk, this woman in her 50s with hair sprayed into a perfect helmet, if there were any old records about the little cemetery on my street. I said I was just curious about the history. She typed something into her computer, frowned. "Which one?" she said. I gave her the intersection, described it. "Oh," she said. Her fingers stopped moving. "That one?" "Yeah," I said. "The small one." She shuffled some papers around, opened a drawer, closed it again without taking anything out. "Those records. Some of them weren't digitized," she said. "We've had some issues with the old storage. Moisture, you know." "Is there anything at all?" I said. "Dates, names." "I live right across from it, and I realized I don't actually know much about it." She pasted on a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, you know it's old," she said. "Late 19th century. Town was smaller then. They used the hillside before they opened the big cemetery on the south end. Lot of families moved remains later to be together. Kind of patchwork what's left." "Patchwork?" I said. "Some stones don't have anyone under them anymore," she said. "Some people are buried with no markers. That's just the way they did it. I wouldn't worry about it." "I'm not worried," I said, too quickly. "Just curious." She glanced at the person in line behind me. "We don't have much on that one," she said. "If you really want to dig, you'd have to ask at the Historical Society. They like that stuff." There was something in the way she said dig that sounded deliberate. I thanked her and left. I didn't go to the Historical Society. A few nights after that, everything came together in a way I still can't explain, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to. It was snowing again. Big flakes this time, thick and slow, dropping straight down in the light from the street lamp. Kelsey was at a friend's place, watching some holiday movie, so I was alone. I had the TV on low, more for company than anything, and I was sitting on the floor wrapping a couple of gifts for my dad. My hands smelled like Scotch tape and that weird inky paper smell. Something made me look up. Not a sound exactly. more like that sense you get when someone is watching you. The curtain was open just an inch more than usual. Through that gap, I could see the iron fence, the tops of the stones, and the soft white covering everything. The cemetery looked almost pretty like that. Clean. The world felt far away. My eyes went to that grave in the back without me meaning to look for it, and I saw, very clearly, that the snow around it was wrong. Every other stone had an even blanket of snow around its base, smooth and untouched. That one had a dark ring at the bottom, a halo of exposed earth where the snow had either not settled or had been disturbed and brushed away. Even from my window, I could tell the dirt was wet and almost black against the white, a fresh, raw circle, like a mouth. I set the scissors down. On the TV, someone was laughing at something, the sound thin and far off. It wasn't that the earth was open. There was no hole, no dramatic mound. It was just that ring of visible soil, as if someone had dug down and then carefully tamped it back, leaving the edges sharp. And there were marks in the snow leading away from it. Not clear footprints, more like smudges, places where the white had been dragged or pushed. They angled toward the front of the cemetery, toward my house. I told myself it could be an animal, a deer maybe. They walk through places at night, nose around, scrape with their hooves. It could be that. It had to be that. The porch light flickered then, a little jump that made the room pulse brighter and darker. I froze. The furnace hummed underneath, like it didn't notice anything. There was a sound at the front of the house, not on the gravel this time, on the porch, a heavy, deliberate step, then another. Then the very soft scrape of something against the front door, not knocking, just testing the boundary. My throat went dry. I couldn't make myself move. The TV might as well have been on mute. I couldn't hear it over my own heartbeat. The doorknob didn't turn. The lock didn't rattle. Whatever it was just stood there, right on the other side of that wood, close enough that if I'd reached out, I could have touched the outline of it through the panel. After a while, 5 seconds, 5 minutes, I don't know, the boards stopped creaking. The pressure on the house eased. The porch light steadied. A car went by at the bottom of the hill, a soft swish on the snowy road, like the world starting again. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat up in bed with the lamp on, listening to every sound until the sky started to go from black to dark blue. At some point, exhaustion won, and I must have dozed. Kelsey shook me awake around 9. "You locking creeps out of our house now?" she said, half joking, but her face was pale. "What?" I said, disoriented. She held something out. It took me a second to realize it was my spare house key, the one we keep on a little hook by the front door. Except it wasn't on the hook. It was muddy, smeared with dark soil along the teeth. I sat up fast. "Where did you find that?" "On the floor by the door," she said, like somebody dropped it trying to put it back. We stared at each other. "Did you?" I started. "No," she said. "I didn't touch it until just now, and I didn't use it last night." Neither of us said what we were thinking. Instead, we went downstairs together and checked every window, every door, all locked, nothing broken. No signs of a break-in except for that dirty key and a faint line of soil along the bottom inside edge of the front door, like something had seeped under and been wiped away. Later that day, when the sun was out and the world felt less threatening, I stood on the porch and looked across the street again. The grave in the back looked normal. Snow around it, no dark ring, no visible tracks, just white, unbroken. I went back in and pulled the curtains mostly shut. A week before Christmas, I was going through a folder of old paperwork my dad had dropped off. Deeds, tax stuff, Things from when my grandparents owned a house on the same street years ago. I wasn't looking for anything particular. Honestly, I was just trying to distract myself. At the bottom of one of the envelopes, folded in half and gone this thin yellow color, there was a photocopy from some town history pamphlet. It was a little blurb about the development of the hillside, how they'd turned farmland into housing at the turn of the century. There was a paragraph about relocating certain family plots to the municipal burial ground. It mentioned names. One of the names caught my eye, not because it was someone I knew, but because I'd seen it before, squinting through the glass of my front window at that crooked stone in the back. Same last name, same year, 1883. I didn't say it out loud. I just traced it with my finger. There was a note in the margin in someone's cramped handwriting. Some graves never moved, out of funds. I thought about that dark ring of earth, about the uneven ground in the back half, the sunken places where the grass dipped. About what the clerk had said at City Hall, some stones with no one under them, some people with no markers. Patchwork, I said softly to myself. I took the paper to the cemetery the next day. I don't know why. Maybe I thought if I could stand in front of that stone and see the name clearly, it would feel smaller, like just another piece of old information. The gate was open when I crossed the street. There were no fresh tire tracks in the snow. The iron was cold against my hand when I pushed it the rest of the way. It squealed a little. The snow crunched under my boots as I walked along the path. I could hear my own breath, the faint whir of traffic far down the hill, a crow calling somewhere up in the bare branches. No other sounds. Up close, the cemetery felt different, bigger somehow. The newest stones near the front gave way to older, thinner ones with lichen covering the dates. Some stones leaned into each other, family names matching, whole sections where everyone had died the same year. Flu, probably, or something else. People forget how many ways there are to go. When I got to the back, my feet started to sink a little. The snow was deeper there, uneven. I stepped carefully, aiming for the tufts of dead grass poking through. The solitary stone stood just where I'd always seen it, listing a tiny bit, its top capped in white. The name was the same as on the paper. The dates matched, 1850 to 1883. The inscription below was worn, but I could make out enough. Beloved son, went home too soon. My fingers were stiff in my gloves, but I unfolded the photocopy and held it next to the stone, comparing. Same spelling, same everything. The note about never moved pressed itself into my mind like a thumbprint. Behind me, snow shifted. Not loudly, just that soft, sticky sound of weight changing. I didn't turn around right away. For a second, I stood there and thought, this is ridiculous. I am in a cemetery in broad daylight. I am holding a piece of paper. There is nothing behind me that isn't on the map. Then I turned. The cemetery was empty. Just rows of stones, the iron fence, the trees. No one at the gate. No one on the path. The only prints in the snow were mine. Except there was one other set. Faint, almost erased. They led from the direction of the front gate to a spot a few feet away from where I stood, and then stopped, like whoever made them had taken one last step and then vanished. The top layer of those prints looked smudged, like wind or time had tried to fill them back in and hadn't quite finished. I stood there until I couldn't feel my toes. Then I went home. That night, Kelsey came into my room without knocking, which she never does. She looked shaken. Actually shaken, not just mock spooked. I think we need to do something about the key, she said. What key? I said, even though I knew. She held up the spare. She'd cleaned it since that morning a week ago, but I could still see where the metal had darkened in the grooves. "I hung it back up," she said, "and now it's on the floor again. I heard it drop this time." My stomach did that slow flip. "Drop from what?" "From the hook," she said. "Like somebody took it off and tried to put it back but missed." We stared at it together. Something about that was worse than footprints or sounds. The idea of something trying clumsily to act like it belonged there, like it lived here too and just wasn't very good yet at the little habits. "Just put it in a drawer," I said finally. "We don't really need a spare." She nodded, lips pressed tight. "Yeah, okay." She turned to go, then paused. "Hey, Laura." "Yeah." "If you ever hear it upstairs again," she said, not looking at me, "just don't say my name, okay?" I didn't ask her why. I knew why. We never told the landlord any of this. What would we say? That the cemetery was leaking into the house? That something kept tracking soil onto our floors and learning how our doors worked? We're not crazy. We pay our rent on time. We go to work. We watch bad TV. We buy milk. After a while, it settled into a pattern. That sounds strange to say about something like this, but it did. Almost like the way you get used to a train schedule or neighborhood noise. Every few nights, the gravel steps or the porch creak, or that soft weight on the stairs. Sometimes there'd be a faint smell of damp earth in the hallway, gone by morning. Once in a while, a bit of dirt by a door, a scuff on the floor that wasn't there the day before. I started checking the grave less, not more. I learned that looking didn't change anything. The gate would be closed at dusk, open some mornings. Flowers would appear and disappear on that solitary stone without anyone ever seeing the person who brought them. The groundskeeper moved a little slower as winter wore on, but he still nodded, still said morning, and never mentioned footsteps. I thought about moving. Of course I did. But moving takes money and time and energy I didn't really have. And there was a part of me that felt reluctant, I guess. Like if I left, I'd be leaving it alone with someone who didn't know its habits yet, someone who might make the wrong kind of mistake. We still live there, Kelsey and I. She's talking about maybe buying a place with her boyfriend in a year or two, and I tell her she should. When she asks if I'll be okay staying, I say, "Yeah, of course. It's just a house." I don't go across the street anymore. I don't need to. I've seen enough. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I sit on the couch in the half-dark and listen. I hear the river far off, the occasional car, the old bones of the house shifting as the temperature drops. Every so often, over all of that, I hear that soft crunch of gravel and the steady approach of footsteps that start at the fence line and stop somewhere I can't quite map. I tell myself there are still a lot of living people in this town, more of us than of them, that not every old story means something, that sometimes a grave is just an accident of where the money ran out. I lock the doors. I put the keys in drawers. I close my eyes and breathe. Across the street, the iron fence stands there, thin as a line drawn in pencil between two parts of the same page. The fence was never meant to keep anyone out.